All right, good evening, everybody. I call this meeting of our Board of Education Operations order. We will start with public input.
Our public commenter is Samuel Ty.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I will do my best to adhere to the 3-minute timer, and I apologize. I'm battling a head cold, so I hope this all makes sense. So I submitted a public comment, and I hope to speak today a little bit about the MMSD employee health insurance premium contribution increase that we received notice of on May 26th, 2026. And I do not say this to in any way discount or speak critically of the hard work and incredible intents and the dutiful management of public funds that our district and its employees have performed over the years. Absolutely deeply grateful for those benefits and for the stewardship of the public funds and trust that this district has maintained heretofore. When we received that notice of health insurance premium increases, it was, and then going back through some of the board comments on this, it seemed like the common language of the time was use a 3% increase to the employee share of the health insurance premiums. And I just wanted to speak to just how deeply that will be felt by many who are going to experience that 3% increase. The increase from 6 to 9% on the premium cost for a teacher in the Dean Family HMO on a 12-month pay period plan changes from $159.16 to $274.30, which is a 3% increase in the share, but it's also a 72% increase in how much they're paying for health insurance for them. A similar staff member on the Quartz HMO, Family HMO, will pay 77% more than they paid prior. And it's not that is taking into account the cost of the premiums increasing as a whole. At the same time, the district is considering a 2.63% base wage increase. But again, when we think about those staff members and based on DPI data on teacher compensation, if the average teacher and is on one of those health insurance plans, they can expect that if that 2.63% base wage increase goes into effect, that $115 of that base wage increase per month, which is about $165 pre-tax, for that average employee, average teacher, $115 of that $165 will go toward the premium increase alone. We're talking about increasing gas costs, increasing food costs. It pretty much all but nullifies the base wage increase. So thank you again. I hope you'll consider alternatives or a phased approach to increasing employee shares of the health insurance premium contribution. But if it's water under the bridge, there it is. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. I move to approve the minutes from the operations work group meeting dated May 11th, 2026.
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Mosner-Theltham. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. I think it's 5-0, but I might be missing Board Member Pearson.
Could you see me?
I get. Motion carries. This evening, we're going to talk about salary compression, our safe routes to school plan, our facilities referendum, food and nutrition, our 2026-2027 preliminary budget. We have a pretty packed agenda this evening, so I am going to turn it over to get us started to our superintendent, Dr. Joe Gothard.
Thank you, Chair Muldrow, board members. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. You're right, we do have a number of reports tonight, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started. And to begin with, for our compensation review and recommendations, Jennifer Trendell from HR and Kate Link, our compensation specialist, are here to share our recommendation that we bring before you tonight. So I'll turn it over to them.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gothard and members of the board. We are here to provide the board with an update on our findings and a proposed compensation solution for our longest tenured teachers. In conjunction with Evergreen Solutions, who we have contracted with for the compensation study, we've created a cohort model that determines the level adjustments based on hire date. This presentation that we're about to show you outlines the historical provisions of the collective bargaining agreements that were negotiated and in effect prior to 2001, 2016, changes to the salary schedule design over time, and the resulting proposed amendments going forward. And I'll turn it over to Kate Link, who is the district's compensation analyst.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening. So as Jennifer mentioned, we're gonna go through a couple of things this evening. First, we're gonna start with the historical framework. So the historical CBA provisions that governed how teachers were placed and moved through the salary schedule. And as these changed over time, it changed how teachers were placed and how they moved through the schedule, contributing to the outcomes that we're seeing today. So that first one is prior experience caps. So under those historical CBA provisions, there were strict limitations on how many years of outside teaching experience could be credited towards the initial placement on the salary schedule. And that ranged anywhere from 4 to 5 years, depending on the year that the teacher was hired. There were additional provisions that allowed for a higher initial placement based on verified non-teaching experience for military service and or Peace Corps. But these allowances were also similarly capped. So as a result of these restrictions, the ultimate combined cap on incoming experience was limited to between 8 and 15 years, depending on the year that the teacher was hired. So for example, a teacher hired in 2003, they may have had 15 years of outside teaching experience, but when they came to MMSD, only 5 years of that experience counted towards their salary placement. So next, we'll look at the movement on the salary schedule. So there were also provisions that tied annual step movement to the number of total days and hours worked. So a full step each year was not automatic. The salary schedule did have half levels for those teachers who did not meet the requirements to move a full step. And there was also a provision in place that once a teacher reached that level 15, they would remain at that step for 2 years before moving to the next. So given these provisions, at the time, the level on the salary schedule did not equate to years of experience or years of service. And then there were salary schedule changes. So the design of the salary schedule was altered multiple times over a multi-year period. And that primary change was the removal of entry-level steps. So in the year 2000, that first level was removed. So the salary schedule went from starting at level 1 to level 2, and then subsequent levels were removed up until 2017, where the salary schedule then started at level 8. And then in 2018, the salary schedule underwent a complete redesign, shifting from numeric to alpha, removing the half levels and removing that 2-year hold past level 15. And at that time, there was no shift in where teachers fell on the salary schedule, as the new levels now corresponded with the old levels. So that provision that levels on the salary schedule do not equate to years of service or experience would be in place at this time. So just to summarize those changes, this chart brings together all of the changes we were just discussing to highlight how the schedule and placement guidelines have shifted throughout the years. And while we do have this history of when those experience caps and movement rules were in effect, tracking how each of those apply to every individual teacher over several decades becomes highly complex and varies from person to person. So because of these individual variations, a teacher's current step on the salary schedule does not tell us the whole story. To find that consistent baseline that applies to everyone equal, Equally, we looked back at a fixed data point, which is their hire date, and using that hire date, we developed the cohort. So again, using those hire dates, we were able to see exactly what the starting step structure looked like when a teacher entered the district. The cohorts were developed to show what the starting step was at their time of hire. And since that starting step changed over time, sometimes changing from year to year and other times staying the same for a few years, that specific hire date is what allows us to group everyone into the correct cohort. So then we took those cohorts, which correspond to the starting step at hires, to determine what the step adjustment should be. So the logic is based on where that cohort started on the salary schedule versus where it sits today. So some examples up there that you can see, if you, when the cohort started at level 1, they are 7 steps away from today's entry point. So their adjustment is 7 steps. For the cohort that started at level 2, they are 6 steps away, and so their adjustment is 6 steps. So these adjustments simply bridges the structural gap for each cohort. And then some examples there on how to look for a teacher, depending on the cohort that they were hired, and the number of steps they're getting, what their salary would have been in 26, 27, what it would be with the adjustment, and then what that increase looks like. So then this slide is to show the average step adjustment broken down by a teacher's total years of service. And so as you look across the data, you can see a natural pattern. Our veteran teachers who have been with the district the longest receive the largest adjustments. And this is simply because when they entered the district, the schedule floor was at its lowest. And so they have the larger structural gap to bridge. This slide shows the average salaries for teachers with 26, 27 data, assuming a step increase and 2.63% CPI. And it shows with and without adjustments. So you can see our newest teachers, there's no movement there because they are already correctly aligned to the current salary schedule. And the adjustments gradually scale up to provide the largest lift to our most veteran staff. And then this is a peer comparison. So how does these adjustments move our teacher salary among Dane County districts? Using 25-26 data. So as you can see, even before our adjustments, we were highly competitive, but the adjustments widen the gap a bit, establishing us as a leader for teacher compensation. And lastly, fiscal impact. So the total budget impact to permanently realign these cohorts for 26-27 is about 3.8 million. And this would be a recurring investment, meaning the new placements would be permanent and would carry through the teacher's tenure at the district.
And that concludes our presentation, and we're open to questions now.
Board Member Nichols.
Yes,
There are 2 others online too.
I am so sorry, Board Member Vanderbulen. I did not see you immediately. Do you mind if Board Member Nichols goes and then I call on you?
Sure.
for explaining the methodology. One question I have is, so it looked like you moved it down to, I mean, you fixed the adjustments on hire date. What does that mean for any educators who got advanced education, or how was that factored in, or was it factored in?
Yeah, so this is simply their step. It would have no effect on the track or lane that they are in that
Okay, got it.
correspond. Yeah, they would keep whatever lane or track they're in according to their education level.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Board Member Vandermeulen.
Okay, can you hear me? Great. Thank you for your work. I'm glad to hear that it is a 7-step adjustment. I think that is understandable. My questions are as follows. One, have we thought about backdating this so that we could include, I also sent an email to everyone on this, on whether we can find out how much it will cost to include if we went retroactive 1 year so we could have this year's retirees included. I think that's really an important step forward, just to find out the number. We may be able to do it, we may not be able to do it, but I would like the number. Secondly, I appreciate the work. At the same time, I wonder if we can create a compensation committee so this, or a system, and I'm asking this of my board members more than the presentation, whether we can create a system that puts a board member on it so we can avoid this happening in the future. Those are my only 2 questions. I
Board
would
Member
like to hear it.
Vandermeulen, would you like to have someone specifically speak to the cost related to retroactively doing this?
Yes, Bob.
Sure. This is the work done by Jennifer and Kate and their team, this afternoon. They determined that if we would compare 25-26 school year, it'd be an additional $3.75 million. The assumption would be you would amend the 25-26 budget in terms of that amendment or motion, but that's the cost.
And actually, Chair, may I have one more question? May I send, if one were to amend the budget, would that be done just like any other budget amendment? Because I've never done a retroactive. I'm asking a point of order because I truly do not know.
Yeah, so if the board would want to entertain, I would expect it would happen at the June 22nd board meeting. And in order to amend the original budget approved for 25-26, it requires a 2/3 vote of the board for passage because you're amending the budget that was approved last fall. But those would be the only caveats. If you go forward and are interested in it, I'd like to continue to work with Jennifer and her team to talk about any implications to Wisconsin retirement system so we can make sure we're having the wording right as to impact the payment and the effect on the retirement system payment.
Thank you. I appreciate that's all, Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. I saw Board Member Pearson, Board Member Mosner-Theltham, and then Board Member Saravo.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for the information. I wanted to ask, when we say it's a $3 million investment for this year and ongoing, does that mean that it's just 3 million from this day forward? Every year will just be a 3 million expenditure? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so looking at effective in 26-27, the dollar amount is just shy of 3.9 million, so almost 4 million. And it would be a base increase to salaries moving forward. Correct.
Okay, and so it's not including you didn't include any of the other things that we're deciding, like health insurance and things like that right now, right?
No, this is just to represent the increase in the salary only. And so this also is in addition to CPI and step adjustments that they would normally get. So this is on top of that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's it for right now at this moment.
Thanks, Board Member Pearson. Vice President Mosner-Theltham.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you also to my colleagues who, well, no, also on the screen, for approving the contract to look into this deeply. It's not so simple when we're talking about making changes to where people sit on the salary schedule. I want to talk about, first of all, how excited I am. This has been a huge topic we've heard about it from lots of people who feel that their expertise is undervalued. And I want to be really, I want to lean into the fact that like, when you've been doing this job for 30 years, you have skills that have developed that you don't have at the beginning. And that's a real thing. So I want to center those most veteran teachers because they do bring something special to the work. So that's one comment. My question is about the recurring addition to base salary. Eventually, people will retire, but we wouldn't notice that sort of. We would just say like, okay, this becomes the norm. Like there's no future time when people who, no, because everybody's just on the same spot. Okay, I see you nodding. Okay, cool. With regard to the idea of a compensation committee, I want to talk about collective bargaining. I think it's really instructive and interesting that pieces of what's going on with people's compressed salaries have to do with decisions that were collectively bargained and agreed on. And Board Member Vanderlyn and everyone else who's sitting here knows that I am looking forward to the return of collective bargaining. I think it's going to be really beautiful. I think it's going to be really powerful and a really exciting opportunity to make sure that the expertise of people who do the work is reflected in their working conditions and in their collective bargaining. That said, knowing that some of the things that today feel like they're not right, we're coming out of a collective bargaining context. For me, I think I'm thinking a lot about how this work doesn't get done, right? There's no like, okay, we did public schools, like we got it, nailed it, done. Like the world will change around us, people's needs will change around us, what people prioritize. I mean, people always are going to have to get paid. But what people want and need will change. And so knowing now the way collective bargaining agreements impact this issue, I'm really gonna keep in my heart that while a salary schedule is hugely important, and I work in a district without one, and it's confusing and it opens up the door for all kinds of prejudices to come through in people's paycheck. But I'm gonna keep in my heart that this is a consistent, ongoing project that we do together and collaboratively. So I think my main comment is thank you so much. And I feel really proud of our ability to get here after so long. So I'm not exactly sure who's I guess Jennifer, thank you so much for your work on this. I'll direct that towards you. And that's the end of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Board Vice President Mostert-Feltham. Board Member Saravo.
Thank you, Chair Walsh. Yeah, thanks for all the work behind this. This was a long time coming. And it's hard to have a lot of patience during the whole time, but knowing that there was a lot of work going on behind the scenes. So I'm glad that there's something now like coming to the table so we can like see what's tangible and like what's moving forward. I was wondering if this is like the first group. Do you know how many other groups we're going to be being when it comes down to like knowing when the next numbers are coming out? Like where's our timeline looking at for like going through all of the different groups that we're going to be doing?
We are still working with Evergreen on the other employee groups within MMSD, also looking at the overall teacher schedule. This is like one very small slice of it. This was what was prioritized. We want to have a salary philosophy for the entire district that incorporates some of the things that Vice President Mostert-Feltham said about consistent and ongoing, and things that are evergreen. I know that that's the name of that company, but something that that works with as things change. So we are still for the 27-28 budget looking at the design for the other employee groups, the teachers, the administrators, also looking at how competitive we are with our hourly wages. So those are still all upcoming with a presentation for the board.
So those potentially as another year out suggestively, or like, that's what I'm kind of wondering.
For the board impact, yes. yeah, they would impact the next budget year, but we should have information coming by like the August, September timeline for this year.
Okay, thank you.
I do think it's important, one thing if
Yeah.
I could add, that not all of these will be looking at salary compression as an issue as well. It's
Right.
truly looking at the entire broad spectrum
Yeah.
of them and just looking for different anomalies within it, so that system is doing that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the priorities that are in here, but also interested to see like what the collective does look like, because it was meant to kind of dive in the whole thing. So yeah, okay. I was wondering, I think it was like slide 11 or 12 about the different points in time that caused those shifts, because I wasn't here. I was wondering, can you point out what caused those to happen? Just, I think historical context is good to have. Or did you?
Yeah.
Did you collect that, like?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, so really it's a result of collective bargaining. So when they came to the table, I wasn't here at that time either, so if they came and decided to change, they would have bargained over, okay, are we gonna keep the experience cap at 4? Are we gonna shift it? That would have all been included in the CBA. So I mean, it was very specific about the caps, what could be counted, and to my knowledge, every piece of that was bargained for. So that would have been a collective decision between the district and the group that was bargaining at the time.
Okay. And I just wanted to share my thank you. And I like the idea of having someone on a committee of sorts when that kind of stuff happens. I know I had asked about something when it came to like the joint review, having something in there, but that never really fruition. And if there was some sort of space where there was a board member involved in part of that process, I would like to see that happen. I've wanted some sort of check-in like that for a long time. So, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. If I see no other questions from my fellow board members, I'm gonna add myself to the stack. I really appreciate the work that went into this, and I think part of what I want to acknowledge is the narrative that got us into this conversation. And so seeing the leadership from our union really demanding that we, look into this and do so intentionally and strategically. And I think one of the results of looking into this that we have to acknowledge is we were one of the highest paying districts in our community before we reconciled this issue. And once we reconcile this in 2026, 2027, in our preliminary budget in June, we will become the district in our immediate community that pays educators the best. And I think we should be tremendously proud to offer a competitive wage and to value the people who work for us. And so I want to ask my first questions really about the impact on our next budget. We've had some foreshadowing that we really need to be thoughtful about where we're at in our budgeting process for next year. Will covering this $3.9 million expense in salary compression force the district into deficit spending?
No, we'll have, and we'll get to those slides later. Overall, not quite done with the budget book yet. It takes a little bit updated from the proposed budget. But what we did is re-estimate our revenues to add enough revenues to cover the increased expenditures, $3.9 million. So the budget you'll be seeing at the June board meeting is balanced at this point in time. Our job would have been a lot easier if we would have got the additional state funds from the surplus bill that didn't pass. But we're able to take a look at, tighten our belt in some areas on the expenditure side and reestimate the revenue. So there you will be voting on a balanced budget in June.
I think that we have a tremendous opportunity to get to do this and do this with a balanced budget. And I don't want to underestimate the difficulty or the thoughtfulness that went into getting us to this moment. And this was a collaborative effort. I have no idea who was on the school board when I was in 3rd grade. But I do know who my teacher was, and I do know how much she meant to me, and I do know that like when I lost my mittens, she had like an extra pair in her desk. And being able to make the educators who were around when I was a child and my siblings were children and who are still around now that my children go to this district, being able to invest in them in a way that is meaningful and significant is something I'm tremendously proud of. And I think the work we did to get here is something we can celebrate. So I greatly appreciate the conversations we've been able to have to do this thoughtfully. And I look forward to continuing to work together to make sure we're offering competitive wages well into the future. I don't believe we have any other questions, although I do see Board President Castro and Board Vice President Mosner-Theltham. Board President Castro.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for their work on this. I think it's especially long overdue for some of the educators in our district, and I'm proud that we were able to do it in a financially responsible manner. So I'm looking forward to voting on this at the end of the month.
Thank you, Board President Castro. Board Vice President Mosner-Theltham. All right, we will move on.
Yes, point of personal privilege. Can I move my seat over there, please, Chair?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I just want to see the change.
All right.
I use Robert's rules.
I did it.
All right, we will now move on.
Like free.
Go ahead, knock me down. Through all that suspense across ceremony.
Great.
Control.
Instagram.
Back of yours.
Nice about it.
Go you, bro.
All right, we will jump into our next topic, Safe Routes to School Plan. Some of you may know, some of you may not do. We've been working all year on Safe Routes to School. We have some lovely friends here with us to talk about to our school district as we work with the city of Madison to develop. So with that, I'll turn over to Vanessa and her team to go through the presentation.
So I have friends here and I'm gonna let them talk about who they are first. Sonia's gonna presentations.
Yeah.
Should I
Should I be in control? Yeah, I'll be in control.
Yep.
Okay, so yes, what am I gonna talk about today? I'm gonna go, yeah, well, first we'll get to that, we'll get to that. First, I'm gonna go over the whole Safe Routes to School project, give you some context about everything that we did, give you some examples of like the work that we did at schools, and then the real thing that we wanna make sure that, you know, to talk about and really dive into today is the strategic plan. And so we'll spend time on those recommendations and then next steps. So, who am I? I am with Tool Design, the logo on the bottom. My name is Sonia Heichel, and I am a planner with Tool Design. We do bicycle, pedestrian, and transit planning and engineering around the country. We have offices, like we have 20 offices, and I am the director of the Madison office. And before I was at Tool Design, I was here at the school district. I was a Safe Routes to School coordinator for the school district. The school district had a grant that was funded to fund my position. This was right around the time that Dr. Cheatham came on board. So I was like, I slightly preceded her, and then was there right when she left too. And so I have the, you know, sort of experience of working within the school district as well. And then, yeah. With me.
Everybody, Sean Koval, he, him from the Wisconsin Bike Fed. I'm our Dane County Programs Manager. And I'm also an MMSD spouse. My wife is a teacher at Van Nuys and a parent too. My son goes to Crestwood. And the Bike Fed is the Safe Routes to Schools provider. We're the grant holder for this part of the state for pretty much Dane County. We get that funding through the state through a Transportation Alternatives Program grant, which Sonia was referring to before when MMSD, essentially MMSD decided not to continue on being the provider for their own district for safe routes to schools. And instead there's more of a regional plan that's been in place since. And currently the Bike Fed is the one that gets to collaborate with school districts and schools all across this area to do safe walking and biking education, amongst other things.
Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Hayes. Most of you here. It's nice to see all of you. Just want to say it's nice to be here with a lot of you. I know it's been a little bit of a hard day in Madison as a community, and so I just want to that. And I am the pedestrian bicycle outreach specialist with the City of Madison Traffic Engineering. But prior to that, I had the great fortune of working in Madison schools, most recently Whitehorse for 12 years. I was at Sherman for a while, and then I was at Goodman Community Center for about 3 years in the teen center. So I know some of your kids and get to hang out and, yeah. So it's good to be here with all of you.
So, so it's important to point out that the City of Madison is the sort of sponsoring entity for this project. They're the ones that released the RFP for the Safe Routes to School plan. My company responded to the RFP, and we partnered with EQT by design on the engagement for this. They're not here today, but have been involved in every step of the way. So the city was sort of the project lead, but at every coordination call, every 2 weeks, we had representatives from school district, the Bike Fed, and the city guiding that project.
And I can say sometimes it was me, it was Cedric Morris in the beginning, when things were more transportation, they were like, he's like, I think Vanessa should be involved. And some things Ashley Getzer has been included on, and Shannon Mount, so.
Yeah. So what are the goals of Safe Routes to School? I mean, the thing about Safe Routes to School is it's not just, the name itself is somewhat deceptive. It's not about routes really at all. It's about making sure that kids can get to school safely by walking, biking, taking the bus. And so in order to do so, you're sort of approaching it in a very holistic way. What can the school district do? What can the city do? What can the Bike Fed do to achieve these, this overall goal of more students walking, biking, and taking the bus? To kind of tackle this problem, we divided it into 5 project goals. So make sure that there's a sustainable and equitable program. First of all, that's sort of like the foundation of the whole program. Make sure that streets are safe around schools, campuses are designed safely. There are, people, parents and children are engaging in safe behaviors. And then there's a supportive community, building that culture of walking, biking, and taking the bus. As I mentioned, there's an overall project. So there's this city and district level, which is the strategic plan. And then there were also school specific plans that our project team undertook. So both of those involved engagement, and both of them sort of like fed into each other. So the things that we were learning when we were out talking to principals and observing traffic around schools fed into recommendations for the strategic plan, and also the discussions that we had with the school district staff, city staff, the Bike Fed, that also fed into what we saw and what we recommended for schools. So again, I'm not here to necessarily talk about the school plans, but I did want to sort of provide context. The consultant team and the city did led like Safe Routes to School plans, infrastructure plans for a total of 32 schools. So Tool Design and EQT led plans for 23 schools, and then the city had some additional grant funding, and they did infrastructure plans for additional 9 schools. And the city does want to cover all the schools in the future, with the exception of Shorewood, because Shorewood Hills is not in the city of Madison. So for the school specific plans, what were those? They were like 4 to 5 page documents with
targeted recommendations for issues right around the school. So, for example, for Midvale Elementary, issues around Midvale Boulevard, or right around the school, if it was outside of the walk area, we really weren't looking at those issues at all. Okay, so strategic plan. What is the strategic plan? Again, going back to those 5 goals, the strategic, I'm gonna go ahead, but it's just basically high level plan to get more kids safely walking, biking, and taking the bus to school. And it's really focused on program and policy recommendations that the city and the school district and the bike fed should be working towards. And so yes, Vanessa mentioned at MMSD, Scott and Vanessa have been involved for curriculum and instruction, things relating to curriculum and instruction. Ashley Pletzer and Bailey have been involved in reviewing. And then at the city of Madison, a lot of different agencies have also been. So again, getting back to those 5 goals: sustainable and equitable programs, safe streets, safe camp, safe behaviors, and supportive culture. We organize the plan by these, basically in 5 chapters, organized for these plan goals. And each recommendation or each sort of, we're also recognizing that some of these recommendations that we're making or new programs or new policies might not be feasible right away. This gets back to that, we need to be making sure that we're making recommendations for new programs that are sustainable and, basically financially feasible. So there's sort of short-term actions, which can be easy wins, and then there's longer-term actions that might require new funding or program or staff to implement. So now I'm going to go through the high level recommendations for each of those chapters. Within each one of these bullets, there's additional pointed actions. And that's in did they get a copy of the draft plan or no? Okay, yeah, so it's online, it's available online. So sustainable and equitable program is about making sure that whatever the Safe Routes to School program is that it's implemented in a fair way across the entire district. And also, again, getting back to sustainability, making sure that it's a long-term program and not something that will need to be, move around from the district to the bike fed to the city. And then also just, making sure that if there's recommendations around bus transportation policies or programs, those are done equitably across the whole district. Oh, I will say there is, one of the sort of high priority recommendations are providing walking school buses, supporting and promoting programs for walking school buses. So again, short-term recommendations are about clarifying roles and making it easier for schools to do it on its own. Long-term recommendations are about finding funding to support walking staff or volunteers doing walking school buses. For safe streets, a lot of the recommendations for safe streets are about what the city of Madison can do to make schools and to make streets and infrastructure around schools safer. So some of this is stuff that the city's already doing. Some of it is new, for example, the consistent citywide guidance around signings and markings of street design near schools. Making sure to prioritize schools during street paving and reconstruction projects. Safe campuses. So there's a lot of, you've got a lot of campus site designs going into place. So take advantage of those new campus renovations and redesigns to make sure that you're encouraging walking and biking design. For the schools that are not getting redesigned, there are, missing sidewalks, or maybe the signs in the parking lots are signs and markings. The parking lots need to be updated. So that's what the Safe Campus is about. So this is really under, Scott's purview. Safe behaviors. This is where curriculum instruction and the bike feds programs come in. So we want to make sure that pedestrian safety education is provided to all elementary kids in some form, preferably when they're in kindergarten through second grade and just starting to walk to school. Bicycle safety education, we want to make sure that those are provided at all elementary and middle schools. Parking and traffic enforcement, that's something that the city already does. So just continue to provide that, making sure that it's done in a fair and equitable way. And then, yeah, educating drivers about safe behavior that maybe is not punitive, but is more encouraging. And then supportive culture, these recommendations again are also like a combination of things that the school district can do, the bike bid can do, and the city can do. So again, getting back to the walking school buses, we want to make sure that we're supporting those. They're good for attendance, they're good for school students' mental health. And then also, once you get past the elementary and middle schools, you're moving away from educating about behaviors and more about like building a culture and making sure students are like building lifelong healthy behaviors. So we're encouraging using bus by providing mobility, education, and programs for middle and high school students. And also, you know, encouraging biking for transportation, for school trips, that sort of thing. And yeah, another highlight here is just revising a board policy to remove the reference to specific grade levels or ages. So the board policy currently is about school site. Can't remember.
About the age that kids can ride their
Yeah.
bikes to school. And it
Yeah.
specifically says kids up under fourth grade
Yeah.
or something is what it is.
Yeah, and so it's just a recommendation to just tweak that language. That is all, and we can go back and discuss some of these later. I can go back, but I did want to point out, we are now in the final stages. The draft plan was posted to the city's Safe Routes to School Plan website last month, and there was a virtual meeting last month. There was a survey posted along with that draft plan, and we've been looking at the things that people filled out to incorporate any input. And the city's planning on adopting the plan later this summer. For implementing the plan, the accountability is under Vanessa. She's read it. And then, yeah, the hope would be that there would be some, applying for grants and funding to implement some of the recommendations, and that would be coordinated with these partners. So, sorry, I kind of ran through all of that. Are there any questions, or does anybody want to go back to any of those recommendations? Have any questions?
I saw Board Member Nichols and then Board Vice President Commissioner Thalcom.
Yes. Thank you for the update on the plans being developed. My understanding is right now, if a school has a particular safe route concern, whether it's about biking, pedestrian crossing, any of that, they can submit that and it gets reviewed jointly between the city and MMSD and folks that will come out and maybe assess and kind of deal with that. How does that still fit within these overall plans that you developed?
Yeah.
Or do the school-based plans already indicate some school-specific recommendations right now?
Yeah. Do you want me to take this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the planning process was meant to do things on a more systematic way, because that's the thing, is the traffic safety team, the school traffic safety team, which Vanessa sits on, and so does Scott, they're kind of reacting to the things that the principals are bringing up. And so this was meant to like get ahead of that. And so, yes, the idea is that schools can continue to bring issues up to the school traffic safety team. That will not change.
Okay.
But hopefully, there will be, like, if it's a school that we've gone ahead and done a plan for, the team can look at, well, what does the plan say about this, if it says anything at all? Did we do anything about it? Like some things might involve building a sidewalk, like at the row. You know, there was a sidewalk that needed to be built on Tacoma Road in order to like really improve safety around that school. So some things might take a while to get implemented. Other things are things that the city can do right away, like changing a no parking area to a 10-minute parking area. So I think those would just continue to operate as normal, but this whole planning process allowed them to just get a little bit ahead of the process.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then just as a follow-up, we've had some previous conversations this year around particularly traffic, patterns of traffic, behaviors of drivers. And you know, I've been happy to hear how much the district and the city have been like in conversations about that. I think from a board perspective, it's hard to know what actually has been acted upon. So when we say that the safety plan will now sit under MMSD transportation, Vanessa or Scott, like, are there updates about here are the things that have been addressed? Here have been some of the safety issues that have been mitigated. If it was a sidewalk at Thoreau, like, here's where we are. Cause I think right now it's hard to know what actually is happening to improve some of the issues that come up.
Yeah, I can, two things we can answer. One, we put 2 UHTs in this year.
I'm sorry.
2 UHTs went in this year, as we identified them, the one on Park Street.
The unhazardous.
Yep.
Remember that we have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So those are one in Park Street, one in Schrader Road, one for Nana, one for Wright Middle School, or Wright Middle School. Also with this plan with Sonia's great help and her team has helped us design the tool to identify what they are on an analytical basis.
Okay.
There's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of things that you bring with that, but you have to use statistical facts, type of crossing, how much traffic volume, what type of helping mechanism do you have to process it striped? Does it have a crossing guard? Does it have all those things? That helped us give us the tools to make proper decisions and to either rule in or rule out what is deemed hazardous. So this summer with that tool that we created, we talked about, I think it was 2 months
in
ago.
May, I think it was when I did the last update that we talked about that's the plan that came from this.
Okay.
The UHT presentation we did came from this.
So we're actively already going through every route in the city for every school.
Every walk area.
Every walk area to identify what can or cannot be a UHT added to our process.
Okay.
We've seen a couple that are like, we gotta really think about this. And as parents are like, or our staff members like, we look at that, so we actually have a tool to look at that. We can share the scoring. Right? Some of them are or could identify as such, like you're at UHT because it doesn't have this. And as we know, part of that capital planning, like, hey, we need to fix this long term, then we can work with our city partners. If you put this in place, this now reduces risk and hazard. And here's all the other factors that may play into those decisions. So it's not like nope, I like you, you're gonna get one. There are very concrete evidential facts to prove or disprove what it is. So that's a lot of that work that's come to this work already this year.
Yes, thank you for that. I think the spirit of my question was more about how do people know?
So can I interject to answer your question?
Yeah.
Is I'll work with Scott and his team, will develop a cadence and provide when these changes happen, provide them in a weekly update. That way board members are aware of what the changes are that are happening.
Okay.
Because you're asking, you might have said all that what Scott just said, you made a change, but now how is the board informed?
The board, and then we have families at those school sites.
Yeah.
You know, so I think I'm also just thinking like, do schools send out something or is there something on the website? Cause I only raise this because I think that everybody's gonna navigate to the MMSD transportation website to stay up to date. You know what I mean, is probably not as likely.
So I think when a change happens, the people that are affected by the change are the ones that are notified, right? So the families that are directly impacted by whatever needs to be changed, they're being directly contacted by the school or the school and transportation together. Sometimes families are reaching out to the city directly. They're reaching out to, you know, different members of our team. And then we do talk about them at the school traffic safety team that we meet bi-weekly. But I think kind of what you're asking is, I don't know that you need every little thing that happens, but maybe when I do the transportation updates, this is something Scott and I've talked about, that I do bring a I add that to my presentation so that you understand, this is what we've done with Safe Routes this year. These are the updates that have happened. If we have, because we have this other team that's already meeting to reevaluate these things on a regular basis. I guess I'm wondering, how detailed do you want? And
Yeah,
do you want the overview for the, twice a year, or are you talking?
Yeah, I don't want my question to be misconstrued. I think what I'm trying to say is, because this work is collaborative in nature, it's not just the city by itself, and it's not just the district by itself. Like, it requires all folks coming together and the Bike Federation, right? I do think it's important for our families, our school principals, to be able to communicate. If you're wanting more students to walk and bike and bus safely to our schools, like, here, we've done an assessment, things look good, or there was a concern last year about this intersection, here's what the city's doing. I just think that kind of proactive communication is really important, because otherwise people may not know that it's actually being addressed. They may notice it, maybe, or maybe not. So I think that was more the spirit of my question about, like, how do we proactively communicate about things that are being addressed, or if there's a timeline coming down the road.
Yeah, I think there's opportunity there for sure to get the principal and then vocalize community members. I think
Yeah.
there's an opportunity for sure. I know, and part of our cadence will be coming at least twice a year, because part of what we committed to this whole city of Madison and in the team as MFSD is we have to hold ourselves accountable too. Right? And being accountable is to present to the Board of Education and our community members, in the fall when we talk, here's what we did for the summer. Here's where we are beginning to start the school year. And as we get through the school year, then coming back like we normally do in like February or March, here's what we've learned so far applied to date. And
Okay.
our forward actions will continue to be. Because there has to be that accountability piece, right?
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate that too. And I also just know from previous updates, there were some things that were considered safety risks that were more under the city. Do you know what I mean? And that's not a blame game. It's just more to say, we don't control everything.
Yeah.
So, but how can we keep people alerted that it's on the radar, we're working on it? Right. So it's more that.
Michelle, if I could add on, in terms of like proactive communication to school sites and to parents and what that looks like, I think one thing that we maybe briefly mentioned, but maybe didn't focus on in the presentation, was each school will have a school travel brochure. Each school should have a school travel brochure that families get at the beginning of the year from the school administration. And it has a map of the school. It has, notes on that about where to park, where not to park, where the safest places are to cross, in the immediate, again, vicinity of the school community. And that is, those plans have been updated as a part of this process too. And so what we have talked about as a team is the next step should be, sharing those brochures, which have been, had input with them, with the schools all along, but sharing those with schools this summer, and then saying, any other information you want to add to this before you roll that out with families during the welcome back season, please do, because that's the way to set the expectation at the beginning of the year. And if there are big changes and projects, that related to this plan or otherwise, that would feel new to families, I think that would be a really good place to like alert families that last year, we were hearing this, remember to do this, or there's actually a new feature, a new crosswalk, or a new remote drop-off area away from all the busyness of the schools here. So I see the school travel brochures being a really important part of that equation in terms of proactive communication with families.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Board Member Nichols, your questions began at 5:48. It is now 5:59, and we will hear from Board Member Saravo.
Thank you, Chair Muldrow. Thanks everybody for coming here. Like a wide range of. I had a lot of thoughts beginning to bike getting people and stuff like that. I don't know where to start, and I appreciate what is it again?
Sean.
Sean. I appreciate you being here. And I wanted to start off asking you, like, do you just focus on bikes? Do you talk about like scooters and like all the other things that kids have these days when it comes to like safety and awareness?
That's a great question. Yeah, the bike fed is a misnomer. We're we do walking, biking, and busing, just like safe routes to school. So we focus on more than bikes, and do a lot of pedestrian education too. And e-motos, e-bikes, e-scooters are a really hot topic now. That's like the hottest topic in this space. We spend a lot of time thinking about that and working with local partners. And so the short answer to your question is we are thinking about it and working with community partners all the time. There'll actually be a press conference later this month hosted at UW Children's Hospital and with law enforcement and the bike fed and other community partners sharing more about e-bike, e-scooter safety and e-mobility devices, what parents need to know about safety, because frankly, there's a lot of things on the market out there and sometimes people don't know what they're buying and the safety education pieces that come around it. So we at the bike fed are reacting a lot to the new devices in the marketplace, and it's not just us. The Dane County Traffic Safety Commission that reviews fatalities across the region, they're talking a lot about that, that topic in that space. And to help with those decisions that mostly cities are faced with in deciding what is allowed to move through and what spaces, et cetera. The Greater Madison MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, is an entity that helps cities plan for these things. And they just issued guidance around, what are these devices, what should be allowed, et cetera. So I'm going on and on. It's a hot topic. We're leaning in, but I don't have like a straight answer for you on this is what it's going to look like, at MMSD or in Madison.
Are you able to like connect families with places to provide like helmets or actual, like if a student just simply doesn't have a bike, but it would be good for them? Do you connect families to those kinds of resources as well?
Yeah, we do get a lot of requests for that. And there's a lot of partners that help, with that locally. For us, when we go in to do bike education, we always leave the student with the helmet to take home if they would choose. And so we do some of that work, connected to our education programming, but other requests we help folks like kind of navigate, whether it's Bikes for Kids Wisconsin, which provides bikes at a affordable rate for families, or it's other community partners that do give out helmets, so usually cheap, but prices up a lot with tariffs and other things. So yeah, there are resources for that.
Great, thank you very much. I think you have a lot packed into into what you do. I think the education part of all the different types of mobility tools out there for school is a wide range and getting wider. Thank you for coming and talking about all that today. Let's see, where am I? Tom, thank you for being here. I kind of love crossing paths with you, but man, there's been some hard conversations this year at the same time. And thank you for being on here for the city. I know it's important to have everybody collectively talking to each other. I didn't really hear a lot about the crossings that are not right next to the schools, and I find myself hyper-focused on those.
Yeah.
Wondering, when we talk about doing the same thing for driver awareness, where is that?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem that we're doing the same thing at busy intersections and thoroughfares.
Yeah. So my son was friends with Sasha Rosen. And I, so that was very at the top of my mind, right when we were putting together the draft of the plan. There's not a lot of room in this Safe Routes to School strategic plan to, acknowledge that or like do something about it. But there are two specific, things that we included as a result of that crash, if that is what you're thinking about.
I live on Park Street.
Okay.
Solid.
Yes, so
I pass it all the time, so I'm aware of what's there and
Yes.
what's also not.
Yes, so and I used to live on Borough Lane too, so I was also very two things, which is, first of all, so the major thoroughfares, what can you do about those? You can't necessarily narrow the street because it's a state highway. So the one thing that you can do to sort of slow speeds on major thoroughfares, that I think would be applicable to Park Street, is to do like sort of tabletop intersections, so raised intersections. We have raised intersections in Madison, they're Rose Street. Would you even notice that there are raised intersections on Rose Street? You don't. They're designed so that you barely even notice them. But if you're driving, but that's if you're driving the speed limit. If you're going 55 miles an hour, you'll launch off one of those intersections. So that is something that we included a recommendation under Safe Streets for the city to start doing more of. You know, and it was sort of broadly, it wasn't specifically raised intersections, but like, think about how to slow streets on at slow speeds on your major streets, and included that. The other piece that was informed by both Sasha and also by a couple of the crossing guard spots that we saw, was at Park Street and Borough Lane, there is an RRFB, a flashing beacon. And that when you have, when you have multiple lanes of traffic that have to yield, that creates a multiple threat scenario, which is exactly what happened. So one person yields, the other person's vision is blocked, they don't see anybody, they don't yield. And so the recommendation to the city is like, don't do that anymore. At least where near schools. So Park Street is not near a school, so it wouldn't apply there. But like, don't do it at Gammon Road.
Sorry, point of order.
Yeah.
Park Street is very, very close to Lincoln Elementary School.
Yes.
At the top.
Yes.
And once you go down Park Street,
Yes.
there's less than a mile between Park Street and Randall Elementary School. So there's two elementary schools.
Yeah.
Very, very close proximity to Park Street. Are you
But
saying
they're
not
outside the walk area.
They don't cross. We don't have elementary
Okay.
students
Yes.
crossing there.
Yeah, yeah. So it's outside the walk area.
Okay.
And in fact, students going to Wright no longer cross Park Street either, because they're bused. So, but an example that we observed, because we did a school plan at Midvale Boulevard, or at Midvale Elementary, is at Gammon Road by Queen of Peace. There's a crossing guard located at Gammon Road. If you can imagine, oh, sorry, Mineral Point Road, sorry, wrong street. You can imagine driving up the hill from Midvale towards Queen of Peace, there's a crossing guard location there. So, you know, like the recommendation is just either replace that with if you have a multiple threat scenario, replace that with a traffic light or do something else so that they don't have that situation. The issue specifically is like a student, you know, a child will, when the first driver yields, they'll often like wave them across. And so a child will not question that. A child will walk because they're seeing an adult cross them. And so, yeah, it just creates a really vulnerable situation in a very dangerous environment. So those two things. I will say the city is undertaking other plans as well. City's doing just wrapped up the pedestrian plan, which also has recommendations for making crossing safe, crossing improvements. The city has the Vision Zero goal, and you know, looks at both, you know, like when a crash happens, they go out and look through and see what the issues are, and they're also like proactively going out and making, you know, they're spending a lot of money on infrastructure investments. So the city is aware of the problem. Yeah.
I guess my thought in regards to all that, thank you for being very extensive about the different things that are that you made adjustments to and things you're aware of. But I'm thinking of like cross busy streets like that. How do some of these are we saying, is it no kids are now crossing Park Street to get onto the bus? Is that just as an example? Is there other kids that are still crossing there to get on their bus?
Right, middle school gets transported. Middle school does. High schools, some of them still cross over, but we would recommend other areas, yes.
My wonderment is like, is there anything being done for like nature crossings that are highly utilized by schools? By the kids that live in the area, like how do drivers know that? Because like in a school area, when you're not driving the speed limit, you will get a fine that's significantly higher.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that would be more impactful.
Yeah.
Of having some sort of signage and a little bit more on drivers. We're very cognizant that we're saying drivers are the problem,
Mhm.
like what's being done there. And when I'm thinking of the thoroughfares that are around town, some of the thoroughfares have a little, almost looks like the shape of a yield sign. And it says state law says drivers need to yield to that. That doesn't exist at all in Park Street, but as far as I'm aware, it's a state road.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of wondering why that wasn't something that got in there. So these are all the things that I've just been, you've been like collectively diving down this.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing it from that side of it too, because the community put up some please slow down signs, but the ones that they had put up that you would see if you were coming from the Beltline have been removed until you actually get to that crossing. I'm assuming that whoever was doing like cutting the grass maybe took it out. Maybe if it would have been closer to a pole. I find those signs helpful because you see them before you get to the problem area.
Yeah.
So even if the ones are there at the area where it's supposed to be slowing down, that's too late to react if that is the goal. And the goal is obviously to slow down there. So those are kind of what I've been thinking of. So I like this space of being able to have a little bit of direct conversation about other things, because those have been things that I've been viewing as a driver. And very near to.
Yeah, I mean, Park Street is a tricky one. It is the city has some jurisdiction, but it's also a connecting highway, so it's not entirely under the state's jurisdiction. I don't know what to say, but I think certainly we have like some recommendations for sort of campaigns, educational campaigns. That's something that Colleen is working on. And it's good. It's good to, again, build up the supportive culture around driving slow, taking it slow. I think the city's Vision Zero effort is also like an area that could encourage that same thing. Because I mean, Park Street gets a lot of a lot of people cross Park Street. It's not just students that are crossing it. And that's the same thing with East Washington as well, right by East High School. So, these big thoroughfares are impacting everyone, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so it is kind of beyond the scope of the Safe Routes to School when everyone needs slower speeds, and that community campaign.
And I just out of thoughts of I appreciate having a space to connect about this, and I don't know if there's an opportunity for a Chair Muldrow, I don't know if this is more in your premise, but if there's an opportunity to have some sort of board connection on occasion, because you guys are also very clearly looking at policy and things like that, having more of a check-in or having some sort of, I don't really know, instead of just waiting to come to here to talk about things. I'd be very much interested in continuing these conversations and seeing if we'd be more effective with everybody's time and having these kind of conversations. Thank you very, very much for sharing everything today.
Thank you, Board Member Saravo. You started at 6 o'clock. It is now 6:14. I'm wondering if you are hoping somebody's going to respond to your last comment about board involvement in this process.
I don't really know. I think I've been I would like to be involved. I just don't know what that could be. I just have I care about this like a lot. I don't know what that potential would look like. You guys have a really good thing going on with a lot of people already that are already involved, and we no longer have the city county schools, which kind of was the space that was supposed to be that, but you have a much more functional collaboration of people right now. And I don't see why not to take advantage of that collaborative space. So I'm just trying, I don't necessarily.
I don't have a response related to
Yeah.
that, so I guess I would like to direct you to follow up with Board President Castro after the
Okay.
meeting, in relationship to that.
Okay.
Just cause I'm at a loss. I don't have anything.
No, it's okay. I'm
Yeah.
looking for a starting point if there is an opportunity to come up. So,
Okay.
thank you.
It is now 6:15 and we will move on to Board Member Vandermeulen.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank you, I want to thank the city for restoring the crossing guard by Orchard Ridge. I really was worried about that and was following the city really closely on that. I want to thank you because that's a major issue. Number two, I think that we need to do more on bike safety. I really like your program that at Lakeview on teaching kids how to ride. I think that that's a skill that people assume we just have. As someone who took almost 9 years to learn how to ride a bike, I kind of think it's a wonderful program, and I really, really hope it can be transferred to other schools. As for Vanessa, this is my, and on the safe streets, what I would request is that the board doesn't need to know everything. I'm not saying we do. But if there's a major change, whether it be busing, walking, etc., like major on who can or can't take it, or if a program is being started or ended, I would love a weekly in the weekly update. That would be wonderful. I'm asking as an individual. I don't ask for the board. I'm just asking for a possibility on that. Also, thank you for your collaboration between city and schools. I know this is always difficult. I used to serve in the transportation committee for the city. I know how hard these decisions are, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say these are easy tasks. They're not. So just want to say thank you. Nothing but. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. You started at 6:16. It's now 6:17, and we will hear from Board Vice President Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, team, for bringing this. So there's something really beautiful to me about this meeting of having people who have so many touch points for MMSD. Like you said, you did, I did, you got the kid and the spouse. And likewise, we were talking about the collective bargaining agreements from 20 years ago that are impacting where we are now. I'm not from Madison. I'm not from here. And so I tried to bring a lot of deference and respect to people who are from here and who have been part of building up the city and our schools for many, many decades. And there's something really, I think, special and beautiful about these two things coming together tonight, including like around how the city and the bike fed and the school is partnering around this. That speaks to me about sort of like, as a city, we are committed to our community, to the people who live here and walk here and bike here and go to school here and teach here, across roles, across organizations. And I'm touched by that. I think that the draft plan is really good. I found it really easy to read and understand. I super appreciated the pillars, that it's not just about the infrastructure, and it's also not just about the pedestrian behavior, the driver behavior. It's the holistic thing. And I'm especially appreciative of, I think it's supportive culture. I think that we do, I mean, as a nation, I think that we do need to like really be redefining what it means to be a person and a neighbor. And I see that reflected in this draft plan, and I feel really good about that. My question, and of course I love the connection to instruction always. I'm super excited about the idea of increasing the visibility and use of walking school buses. Just last week, we had a really, really spectacular presentation about where the family, youth, and community engagement team is right now, talking about family universities and how we're wrapping families into this work. And so I see lots of connections there as well. My question is, what surprised you? what, like, as you did this work over the course of however many months and years, is there something that stands out as like really surprising? Is that a yes? Or it was all surprising, or this is what we see all over the country?
I will say, so we work on a lot of safe routes to school plans. This isn't like necessarily what surprised me, but we do work on a lot of safe routes to school plans, and we had a different. This plan is like unlike most plans that I've worked on because we really took it. I think because I had this personal experience really of having worked in the school district and then the grant was terminated. And so I think the focus was really about making sure that whatever we're recommending is gonna get implemented and is like actually, and I think the other thing was we were doing a lot of capacity building internally, like just a lot of conversations about what is possible and what everyone's gonna do. And so that piece was also different. So this whole pillar of making sure that the program is sustainable and equitable informed everything else. And so walking school buses, we're not just gonna recommend those. Why are we recommending them? Well, because we're supporting the school district with its own goal of increasing attendance rates. And so it's really, we're not just like, oh, you should do a walking school bus because it's fun, but really like, you need to focus it, especially focus support to walking school buses at the schools that are having attendance issues. And so like clarifying information, like apparently there's a lot of different confusing information about whether teachers are allowed to lead walking school buses, whether schools are allowed to pay for them, and all of that. So like clarifying and having a like unified voice, that's the sort of thing that it informed. So it's not necessarily like surprising approach. It was very slow because it took a lot of meetings. But it was very collaborative, and I think, yeah, I'm hopeful that it'll be, carried out, be very deliberative process.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing that surprised me is just how much high school students and youth have to say about safe routes to school and their experiences. That should never surprise me. I'm a youth developer at heart, but it is kind of like nerd, like kind of feels a little nerdy or like in the weeds. And we held two student input sessions, one at East and one at Memorial, and went over the plans and looked at maps of where, like, we had heard that there were problem areas or opportunities. And both of those were like really well attended, and there was a lot of engagement. And I mean, it's a pretty universal experience, like getting to and from school. So I guess I would like to, in terms of like thinking about like what's next in terms of conversations between the city and the, and the district about this stuff and building systems for that. I think what I'd be curious to do is collaborate to build, systems around, more youth engagement or input. It doesn't need to be a huge, big system, not with the capital S, but what are the regular opportunities for students to say, hey, this isn't working for me, or this is really working well for me, continue to do this around school transportation, and how do we build in feedback loops with our school communities, especially more independent high school communities.
Love and support from our community of Michael Johnson's passing. And here are just a few that we've received from Aurora Area School Superintendent Dr. Tremaine.
Okay, I'll say something. I guess things don't really surprise me a lot, but I'll say a couple things. One, just even prior to this work, when I started with the city 4 years ago, I was going out to schools looking at pickup and drop off just to kind of see how that's something that we could help out in, if we were getting some feed principles. And it always astounds me just like how these very kind of sometimes sleepy, peaceful streets, they're like sleepy for 23 hours of the day, and then for 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon, especially in the afternoon when everyone comes at one time, it just can get a little crazy. And just kind of how we can you know, and I think people have ideas about how to do it, but then also parents and families, you know, everyone's kind of in a rush and in the morning and in the, you know, and it gets a little, it does get a little hectic. I've been hanging out at Marquette Elementary where we're trialing the school street, which has been a lot of fun. And the first couple of days were a little hectic. There was one family that I think this was like an ongoing, from what I understand, like these two families were about ready to come to blows. I think it's been an ongoing thing, but then they kind of realized after a couple of days, they're like, boy, this doesn't even make sense to try and get as close as possible to this. You know, they were kind of, they moved down the street a little bit. They're like, this is too much trouble to try and, because there's a little more conflicts at the end of the day in terms of where people had to turn. So like people were even, you know, Dr. Peterson's like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna turn and go down Dickinson instead of Rogers, you know, because I don't want to have to be. And so even teachers the first couple of days when they were coming in, if they were coming in after we had just closed the street, they were adapted. And so I just noticed that people were adapting and are adapting to things. The other thing I'll notice, just because, you know, I'm more kid-centric on these things, is how important it is for kids when they do have adults that are, you know, there's this little kid, Dontrell, who's a third grader at Marquette, who I just met 3 weeks ago when I started doing the school street. And after about the third day, when he's crossing the street and he sees me, he gives me a hug every morning, which is very adorable. He's like, I'll be back tomorrow. That's great, Dontrell. And so it's just kind of fun to see, you know, and then I was helping some with the Lakeview walking school bus. And, you know, if you don't show up for one day, kids are just, where were you? You know, they're just really, and I'm not surprised by that, but I'm always kind of charmed by that. And, you know, there's a lot of adults and a lot of school staff that are putting a lot of extra to making sure that our kids are safe, you know, before and after school. And some are doing it, it's part of the job, some are just doing it. That's just kind of what you do. I'm always interested when I'm at schools just to see what the culture is in the school. And it often, you know, is kind of based on a lot of time the leadership and the staff that are there. And so that's my takeaways every time I'm hanging out with kids and staff and schools and cars and whatnot.
I feel like I heard you all say that local knowledge matters, that change is possible and worth it. And that we can do this. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Vice President Mosner-Thaltham. You started asking questions at 6:18. It is now 6:28. I've added myself to the stack, but I see a question from Board Member Vandermeulen, so I'm gonna have her go before me.
Just very briefly, where can we find those 32 school plans? Can the board get a copy? Could we get a website or a website link so we could see what those recommendations are?
So they are not yet online. Some of them, they will be, the city will publish them online sometime this summer.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. You started asking your question at 6:29 and it is still 6:29.
Great.
I want to thank you all so much for your work and for joining us this evening. It is such a nice opportunity to get to have this conversation. My first question is instructional, and I just can't like help that. So I know this is a different work group, and I hope you all will forgive me because I think there's a lot to learn from riding a bike, but I also think there's a lot to learn from building a bike, right? Like you have to apply pi to build a bike, and I've heard someone say once that if you build a bike, you'll never forget why that mathematical equation is relevant. In terms of the learning opportunities involved in this work, how are we recognizing that learning and giving students independent study credit in areas like physical education or math? as part of what we understand about, you know, a young person's walk to school. An example I can give of this is I know historically, students who couldn't take the bus from West High School to Capitol High could get Phi-Ed credit because it's about a mile walk. And so I'm curious if kind of the learning that is participating in the walk of the school bus, or, you know, learning about how to ride a bike or organizing your peers to bike to school, if we're celebrating that from an academic vantage point.
Try.
Well,
taking a
I will,
stab
I
at
will
this.
say, I don't know that we are taking advantage of all of those opportunities. You just mentioned some really creative things, and I love them. I don't know much about like the elective PE credit independent study opportunity that you mentioned. I can share that what our pedestrian education and bike education, you know, work looks like right now is we do a curriculum called Walking Wisdom for kindergarten through third grade students, and offer that to elementary schools. And so partnered with Kennedy and Dota this last semester. Our bike education has looked like partnering with middle schools, usually within a PE class, but sometimes within another class period to provide 3 to 5 days of bike education. And it's often linked to a neighborhood or community ride or some sort of event at the end, whether it's the bike-a-thon at Whitehorse or the environmental conference ride at Spring Harbor, or just this last year, we piloted a universal bike education in 9th grade to Memorial. So we were going in to Memorial PE classes and providing a 5-day unit. PE is required as a 9th grade student. Every student at Memorial PE had access to this 5-day. But so it's traditionally, I'm most familiar with the traditional within the realm of the school day or academic credit models. That's what we have been doing in MMSD. And partnered, and the Bike Fed has been doing, at least with MMSD. But I bet that some folks out there that are doing other, I know that there are folks out there doing other creative things, and I'm not sure if Vanessa, you or Colleen can mention it, you know, like other creative opportunities outside of the traditional school day or traditional classroom setting that offered up, you know, credit. I will say that there, in terms of building a bike, that happens during extracurriculars, during high school bike clubs. So there are bike clubs at all 4 of the, you know, comprehensive high schools, and one opportunity, or in 3 of those 4 high schools, bike repair is a big part of that. So there's students that we were just, you know, trying to get to the end of the bike building process this last week, because our final bike club meetings were this last week. So 2 students at Memorial finished up their bike, and one student was building a bike, and we found out that when we went out for him to test ride it, he actually know how to ride the bike that he just built. And so now we're in the process of, you know, helping him, you know, learn how to ride. And in Memorial, you know, during spring and fall semester, there's probably 20 to 30 students that we taught to learn to ride a bicycle that had never ridden before. So there are a lot more that maybe is the that's not part of this plan, but that is something that surprises me, is there are a lot of high school age students that haven't learned to bike. And that's just my own, you know, maybe bias and cultural, you know, experience growing up. That was something that, you know, my friends did do. But seeing the joy and getting the emails from parents afterwards of, I can finally ride a bike. Thank you so much. We hear that through the PE teachers often, and that's like a huge highlight for me. So
I will say, just piggybacking on that and not responding directly to your question, the learning to ride a bike, we did include like a recommendation to have the district explore getting balance bikes in like 4K kindergarten, 1st grade, so that every kid, you know, can learn how to balance a bike first. And then they know how to balance a bike, and then they'll get the bike education later. And so that's a big problem when you're doing bicycle education and you have 3 or 4 kids who don't know how to ride a bike. It makes it really hard to teach the whole class. I mean, yeah, it's always wonderful. It's like super amazing to teach kids how to, you know, how to balance, because the payoff is so great. But the idea would be you'd have like sort of a series of bike education programs, starting with balance bikes in, kindergarten, so that everybody knows how to balance, and then going to 3rd through 5th grade, just teaching the basic, like, how do you ride in a straight line, and, stop and start, and then, in middle school, getting more independent, and then in high school, getting more independent. So you have a whole, we kind of based our process off of Seattle Public Schools, which has a really great program with that sort of situation. And we put Ashley Shannon in touch with the Seattle people too. So, yeah.
I really appreciated your answers to that question, both in terms of what we're doing and the potential to do more, and kind of the direct service to our young people, prioritizing their learning and their experiences. As the parent of a middle schooler, I think like part of getting to school safely is wearing a jacket when it's really cold. So if you all could work on that, I would really appreciate it as a mom.
This is realistic and feasible only.
I know. Thank you. I so appreciate getting to have this conversation and think about what this means. And I want to thank our mayor and our folks with the city for all of the work that's gone into public communication, all of the work that's gone into making sure that we have crossing guards and that areas where our students cross are visible. And I think, we can do better than we're doing, but we are, striving in the right direction and doing it in collaboration in a way that makes me very, very grateful. If there are no further questions from my fellow board members, we will move on. All right, thank you all so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for joining us.
What you do?
All right, we will move forward into the referendum update this month. Yeah. So a little update where we are in phase 1. I'll try to talk about phases now as we kind of deeper into phase 2. So phase 1 upcoming work, if you have not been to the site, has been pretty fascinating last 2 weeks. We have vertical walls that are up around mains, the large gym at Blackhawk Opera, small gym now, gas walls. I sent them. Oh, saw the Blackhawk. Yeah. So really fast things come flying in the air, and we're working on structural steel at Blackhawk Gompers as well. We are full speed ahead. Unfortunately, the rain rained us out today, but we'll be back at it tomorrow. Sherman Shabazz, we are building the inner gym box now. So that'll take another 2 weeks or so. Then you'll start to see the forming of the outer walls. That's kind of a box within a box. So that'll start to happen. We are deep within plumbing, electrical, going right now on the grounds, and then start getting more enclosures, and we'll put some roof structures on. Our drilling is starting to take place at Blackhawk Gompers for our geothermal systems, and they'll eventually move over this summer over onto the Sherman site as well. So lots of activity. We are full speed on all of our permitting moving forward. And we have now got the GMPs set for board vote in June, which we'll get to in just a few moments. Going into phase 2, a lot of work is being done with our staff at the phase 2 buildings at Senate and Cherokee. We are a little farther behind in Tokyo Orchard Ridge. It's a much bigger building, and it's kind of a stagger to have not 3 buildings almost going at the same time. So you do the work, just a lot of work. So we have this week, or excuse me, last week, my weeks are mixed up. We had a public input session for our families at Cherokee and Senate. I heard a lot of great things about kind of incorporating their feedback, their design. Had some really great questions on green space recovery, percentage of new green space versus old green space. The Cherokee area, we're able to respond and kind of show them matching for what it is new to old. Senate Middle School talked about kind of reshaping how that site's going to work and form. Which I'll show here in just. So coming up in June, so where we are in phase 2, we'll continue staff engagements for Senate this Thursday. I keep screwing that up, sorry. So
So the Senate group will see the workings of the new building, looking for issues within their supervision, how their stuff is laid out. They can see this shouldn't work or can't work. We want to understand what that looks like. We had some great sessions with Cherokee, few comments were made, which we can definitely apply. So we'll continue that work next week. And then throughout the summer, then we're turning over to more of the finalized design pieces to show to that staff on Cherokee and Senate in August at the back to school as we turn over to construction documents and kind of push those designs to the finish line. Toki Orchard Ridge, we are coming up with our first kind of passes to the building. We'll be sitting down with the principals next week of how this new design will shape in, really getting their input, how they manage their building, what it will look like, how it will shape in their community. And then we'll take that forward to their staff engagements in August, because it is a few months behind, so it fits our timeline. That will break ground in the fall and the spring, while the other two schools break ground around October. Also in the summer, we're doing a lot of land use permit submittals, DAT meeting submittals, UDC, Planning Commission, all of the meeting schedules for the city of Madison, which will become a regular cadence for us. We've had some early preliminary discussions with the UDC and used some of their application of some thoughts. We are getting some really good feedback. Last time we had some challenges getting through there, and I think we've learned a lot from you put what the city will look like, and they're going much smoother. And I think we're really honing in on some really solid designs, which I'll show you just right now. So this is the new Senate Middle School concept. So we're going to get a little deeper in it as well. So the existing school is in your bottom right-hand corner of the colorful boxes in between La Follette and the new space. So the new Senate building will wrap up and around the existing building to the west and to the north. We're changing how we're accessing our site to a driveway that will come straight in versus kind of come in and angle to the right and you kind of leave school. This will be a beautiful straight path with dropping off lanes at the west side of the school. As the parents are then dropping their students off to Levy, they can do a roundabout up on the top or up side of the site and get out of the site. So we're minimizing contact with students, and staff can go bypassing, turn to the right and go to their parking. So we're minimizing a lot of cross traffic and trying to, if you ever been to Senate during pickup drop off, it's a nightmare, right? You can't get anywhere or do anything, and it's a tough site. So we're going to minimize the impacts there. There will be some tough challenges for parking. We've told our staff it's going to stink really bad, and we're working on mitigations for that, but at the end, it's going to be a beautiful site. Flom Road is also in process of being restructured and redone over the next 2 years. City and planning for a bus lane, dedicated bike lane. So we're incorporating all of those processes and with the city of Madison. And with that new pathway extended coming across Flom Road, be a wider sidewalk. And it allows us to have drop-ins of patterns you see there in red, kind of show the patterns of walking and dropping into the site. So there's a lot of low spots called Lake Senate. Lake Senate won't be this much anymore. It'll be brought up in height. We'll mitigate how the water is moving around to make sure we don't have giant poolings of waters that we do now. Also keeping a lot of the trees that will be remaining on the site. Playground will be in the front, but again, I talk about walking paths, accessibility to Flom Road, accessibility to the high school, accessibility to Lucier Stadium. All of them flat sidewalks, wide sidewalks to accommodate both pedestrian traffic, bike traffic, and all the things that have to do with that school. And multiple points of entry into the school when it needs to be, right? So when students are in recess, you have 2 points of view, so you have good supervision lines of vision, and also kind of separating, drop off with playgrounds, right? There's a kind of a natural buffer we've created there, because it can cause some conflicts. You got cars and kids playing at the same time in Senate. There are balls that fly in that traffic. So we pulled that away. So we allowed some buffer. 2 soccer fields remain to the north, and some bio-retention. So still remain for the high schools and green space for the middle school as well. I will point out, I don't have a laser pointer, but I will point out where the existing school is now will turn into green space. There'll be a little bit of a playground and more on the front side of it. But if you picture like a long grassy knoll or like kind of a library mall type thing, where you have a beautiful greenscape, pathways that lead and point to La Follette, really opening that connection to that shared learning they do. A lot of 8th graders go to the high school for educational purposes. So it's still connecting those 2 buildings, but yet
have identity. So beautiful space. Generalized floor plan, we are still moving this around a little bit. We have since cut back the gym for some budget things, which matches all of our other middle schools. But it's kind of a first floor plan. So the center is unique. The welcome center during normal running hours, except for drop off and pickup, will be that, it looks like a number 1 up there. It's the right-hand side. That's where the new entrance will be. That'll be visitor parking. That's tucked away in the back side of the school. So you go, when you come in as a visitor and a non-business part of it, you go up around the school, there's visitor parking. There's something like that, and you come in that way. So there's kind of a shielding from our students. You go around the building, you come in that entrance, there will be a secured and buffered entrance there, administrative offices, and it leads right into the community space. So in the exact center of that building, you see like a peach square block. That's kind of the community room we've talked about. It has the laundry facilities, has position stationing, food pantry, and it again ties into that brown, that reddish area underneath there, which is the cafeteria. Again, going up to the top of the page is where it ties into the gym, right? So this has this beautiful connection to all things community and events. All of that will be centered in the school, very similar to what you saw in the other schools that you've seen. It's leading and drawing people in to take part in our festivities and all that work to lease the space or do what they choose to do against. You look at the design in the upper left, it's one of our educational wings. Imagine the 6th grade, there's 10 classrooms around there. They also have that separate buffer, right? They have a set of doors that keeps them in there. So they want to have festivities. There's a layer of kind of staying within themselves. There's also a doorway that leads to that corridor. So in times of community, we can shut that doorway down. Right, we can allow that to have education space and not be kind of intruded by our community. Our kitchens are in dead center. That's the red piece. Bottom side, you see that very dark blue. That's kind of our CTE and our music. So we have all of our flex labs, our art wing with kiln. We have our CTE woods arts or woods craftsman there, and we have all of our vocal music also down in that wing. Those places and the ones on the very south don't have any education space above it. So it has room to let the sound go away and you're not kind of being constructed with the band's instruments playing and stuff like that. So that's kind of our first floor. Oops. I don't know why the second floor didn't show up. Well, the second floor is very similar. It has 2 education wings in the library. I must have screwed the slides. That's my fault. But basically mirror what you see, the 2 education wings on the top, dead center looking over the fall at the grassy knoll area, I call it, is you'll have a beautiful library that kind of really opens up to that space. I'd use a different word. But it's a beautiful grass library mall there that will open up to that space and the library. Accessibility to the building. We're always making sure we're conscious about all of our learners in our community. So you have multiple points of entry into the building. On the far right, you have the welcome center. And we've centered the elevator dead center to the building, right? Connecting all of the spaces that need to be high volume area. Directly off our cafeteria, it's right near educational wings. You go upstairs and it opens up right near the library, right where the other 2 educational wings are, and our student services. So it's very centrally located, kind of a picture like a bullseye. It's got a nice periphery work all around it. Very easy to get to and off of main corridors. So we're very conscious about how those are going to interact and work. 1 elevator is set for this building. It's because it's beautifully centered in the building. It doesn't stretch farther away from it. It's pretty compact, dense, and useful building. Here are some initial looks in the renderings that we have. So this would be looking from Flom Road. If you take a drone up on the corner of La Follette and Arboretum and looking at that building, in front of you would be the old building, and kind of behind it, you'll see the new building taking shape. To the left is those instrumental buildings on the Flom Road side. And on the right-hand side where the flagpole is, that would kind of be where the cafeteria is now Senate. So just to the back side of that building, there's the main entrance as Senate on the right-hand side. That's the main offices. The gym box is just behind, and the educational wings and library you can see in that brownish brick color.
On the left side of yours.
Wait, where is Flom?
Flom Road is on the left.
On the left.
Yep. You can't see it. It's a little off the screen.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Soccer field.
Tree line is
Follow
high school's on the right.
Yep.
Winona Golf Course is off to that tree line.
Yep. Soccer fields are just to the right behind that gym box.
Okay.
Everything kind of pulls to the front of the school, but lots of green space.
Is this inside though? Sorry. You're saying the driveway right now, we couldn't see it. It was showing up the back of that school. Oh.
Just like
Like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as you come in off of Flom Road, you kind of come in straight and then you take a slight move to your right. That goes along the west side of that building. This is that 2 lanes that you see. There'll be a driving lane through and a right lane that will pull over to and drop students. Allows them to either go into the recreational space on the right side of the school as you kind of walk through there. Or if you look halfway up the building, there's like a little canopy that's kind of go into that main side door. And that'll take you right into the school to the kind of one of the main corridors of the building. And as you would leave there, you go up the road, you turn at the roundabout and you come right back down kind of a divided boulevard coming back out to Flom Road.
Okay.
So we can stage about 50 to 60 cars, give or take, in that space. Right now, they try to get a lot less than that, and it plugs everything. So we've kind of accommodated for some of that action that they do.
Will it still be a only right turn?
Right,
Down to
right,
Flom?
you turn.
Okay.
Or pick up and drop off. Yep. Yep, that's kind of in the city's planning too.
It looks so different.
Flom Road right now and the rebuild will have kind of a median boulevard too. So it'll kind of change the dynamic on Flom Road.
Okay.
As it comes forward. This is looking from La Follette. So if you're looking at La Follette, kind of the new addition was put on the, we used to call the pit. Giggle, but it's a pit. Look across, that's that connecting sidewalk from La Follette, can take you directly into the cafeteria doors or into the main entrance of Senate from looking to the west from La Follette. And that was Senate. So let's jump to Cherokee quick and then we'll have conversation. So Cherokee, same design premise you saw last time. It's kind of sliding into the hillside. Midvale is on your left-hand side. Cherokee's on your north. So Midvale's on your left and then Cherokee's on your north, at the top of the page. And the school looking into the hillside from the back where the gym will be. So it kind of utilizes the hillside very similar to Blackhawk Gompers. And then opens up to that big oak tree in the north side of the 50 plus years old. As we start to shape the building, you can see the soccer field is on what I call the plateau of the hill. This current existing soccer field is. In relevance to the bottom left is the apartment buildings, and the little square blocks that you see there with the sledding hill that still takes it right into the soccer field in the wintertime. Midvale is on your left. And on the right-hand side, I'll point out where the little looping curve is. Those are accessible ADA paths that come off of Nakoma, also from Cherokee Drive, and there'll be one is from Midvale as well. So all of a sort of a steep hill coming down the grade. We're going to work the path of the grade to be ADA compliance for all of our community members and our students. You'll see in the bottom lobe of that curve is the playground area moved up on the plateau of the hill, which leads us to another secondary winter recreational spot, sledding hill, on the backside under that graded hill. So there are 2 spots for that community to enjoy on top of the playground and also work kind of as you work towards the parking lot. The school sits on the left side, kind of shielding students from the traffic of Midvale. So they're kind of working into the hill and kind of working opposite where that high volume traffic is. Again, the opening to the north, you see that kind of a circle a little bit fainted on the screen. There's that 250-year-old oak tree. Then buses will still continue to stage on Cherokee Drive, which then we have a cool walking path that'll take them right up to that building. It will have a parent drop-off loop and special education buses that are taking them off of Cherokee Drive now where it gets really super congested. So we're able to kind of separate a little bit of those traffic patterns and flows to kind of minimize the interaction piece. And also allow us to better sight vision from staging our buses that can get in and out of Cherokee, which can be a hassle at times. Here's a quick floor plan that we have. Again, light blue is an educational wing. So if the main entrance of Cherokee, students can come in the left side of the screen, which is the facing north where that oak tree is. The green space is kind of the main entrance and secured vestibules there of the parking lot. Education wing is first floor. You have a little bit of CTE also on the first floor, more buried into the hill off of Midvale. The gym is the big orangish yellow box that's kind of buried into the hill, single story, not 2. And then cafeteria space is dead center, again, connecting that community space, cafeteria, kitchens, and kind of that gym collaborative, open to the building public. Second floor, I actually got this one right. So second floor, there are 2 additional educational wings. There is 9 classrooms up there for each wing, for each grade. Rooms, beautiful library looking off to the east, that indirect light. Center of the building will capture a lot of vision and look there. And then up again to the upper right is that instrumental music, kind of pulling that loud noise away from, you know, it can get loud, right? So we're putting that kind of in its own separate areas, which then allows it for kind of a specialized area. It's the music wing. It's that connection piece that really draws to that. And if you think about it, those doorways on the very end of that right where those instrumental music wings are, that's actually at grade of the plateau, right? So you can imagine there's 25 foot of grade drop. So we're building a first floor up and that second floor is all even with that hill. So
Wow.
you can imagine the topography changes we're working on and trying to bury that. The gyms are huge, right? They're tall. So as you see, the gym will stick up maybe 12, 15 feet from the hill, but it's not going to be this giant thing that you would see. We're actually using the topography to make it shape. So it kind of feels like it's part of the community, not just something big and showing up. So it's pretty cool flying here. What's that?
I said it feels very like right.
Yeah. It kind of is. It kind of is. And that's the right area for it.
Yeah.
Accessibility for the building. Again, the parking lot is directly off north of our page. Very flat sidewalks. We're changing the site to be very flat in many areas. Like right now, it's very hilled and it kind of shapes in weird ways with steps. And now we're trying to level everything out to have 0 entry point, accessible walkways. So entering the building, you walk right into a beautiful flat area. The elevator is again centralized to the building. So you can kind of go left or right, and then you go up directly to the library and some of the instrumental music areas, or you can stay in the flat levels and enjoy the cafeteria and space, all right there centered to the building. Here's a few rendering illustrations. So this is if you're kind of standing on Cherokee Drive to the south.
Cherokee. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. If you're looking to the south, standing on Cherokee Drive at the very tip of that driveway coming in, you'll see the main entrance is that little shadow box kind of in the center. We'll zoom in just a second, but you can see those big education wings extending to the south that then open up to the tree and open to Cherokee Drive. And you can look back and the gym box is there, but it's not huge. A little bit of a jump up, but it's not, we're using that hill to really guide that. And you see a lot of open accessing for bike racks, walking paths, really connecting all of the spaces there and allowing them to engage up to the hill, and also that allows that community to use that park as a park on the weekends when we're having students. Here's a direct kind of look into the front entrance of Cherokee. You see a beautiful ACM aluminum panel type of design with brick base, a lot of durability, but also a lot of highlights, right? Really bringing those natural colors of Cherokee into space. The chimney will be more brick. It's not going to be this cool Wi-Fi antenna looking thing, but it'll be brick for our chimney swifts. And also, as you see to the very far left, you can see the grades start to jump up, right? You can see the hillside start to shape. So those are those paths that we can shape and bring into our site, not have a bunch of steps. Like it gets kind of overwhelming when you have a lot of steps and do. But it also leads to opportunities such as this, where if you're looking on the hill working down, we have to replace the retaining wall to the east. If you remember Cherokee, there's a lot of old rocks that are holding back the grade. So we're having to reshape that regardless, and all of those rocks we're going to reuse, right? Not all of them, most of them. And we'll be able to create kind of a seating arrangement or places that we can do indoor, outdoor learning using the hillside as it's tapering down into the site. So a lot of kind of bringing the old to the new, but also opportunities to have an outdoor amphitheater there, outdoor seating, outdoor classrooms, they tying that together. And then this is the last view is we're standing on Cherokee Drive in Midvale. So Midvale will be on our right-hand side. Cherokee's on our left-hand side. If I'm standing there looking at the school, it's a big oak tree. You kind of see the shadows of the big oak branches. But that's the base of the school looking right at the educational wings. Cherokee right here. solar panels and geothermal as well. So. Any questions on the design before I jump the budget quick?
Oh, these are your budget updates, okay.
I have seen Board Member Vandermeulen's hand up for a little while.
Sure.
Board Member Vandermeulen, would you like to talk
Yes.
about design before we jump into the budget?
Yes. Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. Two things. One, glad that Senate is being made even better than it was going to be. I think that will be good. My question is, will there still be enough room for, like, I know when I toured it for the referendum, they were worried about having enough space for like a changing room for individuals with disabilities. Is that still possible?
All of our buildings have part of the OTPT area and students of need on both floors. They will have a adaptive restroom and a large enough space for all of that in all of our schools.
Wonderful. On Cherokee, little worried on how people are going to get to the library at the second floor. I understand that there isn't an elevator, correct?
No, directly inside the main lobbies of Cherokee, there's an elevator that takes you directly to the second floor.
Got it.
It'll open nearly right to that particular side.
Beautiful. And then my last question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yes.
It has the buttons.
Yes, the new building will have this button.
I know the question coming up.
Beautiful. Everyone knows the question. I'm consistent. Thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. You started asking questions at 6:59. It is now 7:01 and Board Member Sarajo.
Chair Muldrow. Appreciated the nice update and re-looking at the structures and seeing them go up is really cool. I have a little bit of concern about having the one elevator, so I'm just gonna be really just open about that. So I'm hoping that it doesn't have a lot of issues. So I hope that works out well for everybody, because sometimes it's also used just probably by maintenance, and other people that are bringing things up and down and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that it is that the response, if it goes down or anything, I just hope everything that's going to be there is really active. I was over at Shabazz last week for Celebration of Learning, so they were really happy that they were going to have. There's two in that.
Yeah, they're very much different. They're very different spaces.
Yeah.
And we couldn't put it centralized because they don't want students to kind of collide, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So with the middle schools, we were able to shape them, we could centralize everything and allow that kind of adding that community piece and drawing that community to the second floor using kind of the same look and feel.
Sure.
They have much different spaces, no different than Blackhawk Cover has one. It's centralized to the building. So that's what we're able to do.
Okay. It's a little bit of feedback that I was getting, we don't have, there's not gonna be open, the windows will not be able to be
Correct.
opened.
Correct.
Do we have any concerns about that, since we have cold and flu seasons and we just went through something where we needed a lot of air, so.
Yeah, so a lot of people ask those questions, and
Yeah.
a lot of modern design does not open windows when you would use geothermal systems. So once you start introducing more humidity, more context, you start to imbalance the building, right? Geothermal stays at a constant temperature within 3 to 5 degrees year round. So you don't move it up, you don't move it down. You don't get the large swings like we do in our current existing building, and our envelopes are so tight. Right, the more chance you leak air is you're leaking energy out, or you're bringing artificial energy in. Very isolated systems. However, ventilation still meets minimum requirements. So we're always exchanging it through all of our ductwork and stuff, no different than your house furnace would be. We're moving fresh air throughout the building on a central level. And we've also designed our buildings kind of an additional scope of what under schools normally wouldn't do. Is we have a flush mode. We've oversized some of our things, hey, it's flu season, we got some things going on. Sometimes we hear that from our principals.
Yeah.
We'll turn the ventilation right up. It's not gonna make a bunch of noise, we can turn it up.
Okay.
A lot of places don't have that ability.
Yeah.
Or at 5 in the morning, like, or at 3 o'clock, let's just flush the building and we can open up. It'd be a little louder because you're gonna open everything up, but we're allowed to, okay, let's push it all out. So we have those abilities built into our control systems, like some people don't do.
Okay.
But it's normally gonna idle about 40%, right? So we'll have a lot of give and take to do, but it's only something on request and not something a school can say, I want to do this because that's how I feel, because it does change the imbalance of a building, right? So
Yeah.
there's a fine relationship what we're doing, and then we have a lot of smart things kind of in our building, not necessarily smart, but able to do things that not normally able to do in a building that's 100 years old.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. That's a good segue into my last thing I was gonna ask
Sure.
you, actually. Old buildings have asbestos in them, and I know we're doing things proactively. Because that was another thing that came up too. Could you just kind of talk to what we're doing about those old things, old buildings proactively to making the environment around it, essentially.
Yeah, so are you talking specifically these referendum buildings or?
I don't know, I guess like just redesigning an old building where the whole thing's coming down. I think that's more what I was looking at there. But anytime that you undo something that's that old, there has to be some proactive nature.
Yeah, absolutely. So two-part question. So referendum buildings, it's gonna take us about 4 total months to abate and do all the things to, one, partially set up for recycling. But abate a building from all the potential asbestos or lead paint or anything else that may ever show up in a building once you open up things that aren't normally seen. So part of that is taking effect this summer, is it takes 4 months. We're taking these 2 months. We're taking a week in winter break and a week in spring break. Most of the heavy abatements happen this summer because it's 2 months. Once school is done next year, we're gonna gladly help people get out of the building quickly. So then we have another 6 weeks of abatement, which will happen next summer, and then the building has to come down. And you can imagine we have how many months for summer break? We've got to tear the building down, reshape it, reform the earth, put a parking lot back in, put green space back in, put a playground in, all within that little time window that we have. So that's why we're kind of moving things ahead, is getting a summer ahead and to get ahead of all of that work.
Yeah.
So at the end, we know there's no hiccups, and that's assuming we have a little bit of fallback from weather, things that'll naturally build in.
Yes, please.
And foreseeing you may run into abatement, you have to do more than you had planned to do. So we're getting all of that work done now to be ready for next summer and kind of staying on the timeline. In general, for our buildings, we are always doing little things, working on piping or plumbing or something in a reasonable building. We have a dedicated crew that are always tracking through AHIRA what all the objects that are all of our buildings are. If they're doing the work, we have a form that's gone through. It goes to the building heads, it goes to the staff saying, working, and here's the type of it have to do. Here's how long it'll take, how big it is. We track that amongst all of our buildings. So that's what's into. Old building comes down, we know the scope of what it's going to take, and that's how it builds upon. Yeah, we're always working.
Thank you. There's a lot of things that were top of mind and a lot of work being done. It can both the old and the new, right?
There's it's amazing what is happening behind the scenes versus just a building that just shows up. It's fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much, Board Member Saravo. You started at 7:02. It's now 7:08, and we'll hear from Board Member Nichols.
All right, thank you. Just mine is a real quick follow-up to the elevators. When you all were going through the design aspects of the elevators, can you just say a little bit more on how you settled on just one elevator, maybe per building, instead of like a student family elevator and or staff? And then maybe something that you need that's more like maintenance related for moving. And I don't know the costs of the elevators or anything, but I know these elevators will be new. So you would assume they wouldn't break down. In some of our buildings now, where an elevator may be out for months and then they're so old that you guys are waiting for the right part to get to the school. But can you just say a little bit about how you all settled on like one main elevator instead of maybe 2?
Yeah, so one is, could we centralize it to the building?
Okay.
Making sure there's access from every area. and equidistant, right? So it's like, okay, I gotta come in the main door, you wanna have closer to the community in the front door, but also student here and student here. They kind of have to go both ways, right? And how do they get supportive services around that elevator?
Mm-hmm.
Also, the interaction of the age of students, right? So high schoolers at Shabazz and Sherman Middle School, they're very different with very far ends. So we said, okay, let's put one more towards the Sherman side, which is a big community area. And Shabazz needs theirs too, right? The
Got it.
direction of kind of where it has to go. They're very different worlds. Blackhawk Gompers, the elementary's on the first floor, or sorry, second floor, but on the top side of the building, and it's a single story place.
Okay.
So they can enter from the single story, use a single story, but at the very end of their wing, near their cafeteria, then there's an elevator that takes them down if they want to enjoy the gym, or they have performance space, but it links to the lower community room. So
Mhm.
kind of draw the centralized places together. And then when you talk about building in the elevators, we've built them larger, slightly larger, not giant.
Okay.
Slightly larger for stretchers, for mechanical things. We've increased the weight capacity.
Oh,
It's built to the building, right? And any elevator costs a couple $100,000.
okay.
Build it new, and you can put the capacity, you can kind of put a little extra into it, allows you to more flexibility. And it has more modern elevators have triggers that say, hey, this is going bad, or there's a lot more things you have in elevators now than versus old elevators, or you're trying to fit an elevator into an old building and you're kind of strained.
Okay.
So that's kind of the generalized thoughts is how centralized is it? What are the students using, how in between them? And then
Okay.
build them for the right purposes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm always impressed, even when I go into like a hospital setting, how one elevator can serve like people coming in as visitors, rolling a bed into a elevator. You know what I mean? Like it seems like they've, not that I want to make that analogy, but you know what I mean? Like they've thought about a set of elevators having weight capacity, width, depth to meet multiple needs. And so thanks for just talking about how you guys have been really intentional about where it's located and how you are thinking about potentially its multi-use. Yeah, appreciate it.
And when we get Tokyo, see Tokyo Orchard has 2 elevators coming back into play. It's a 3-story building. But the elementary's got one side of it, it's 2 stories. Middle school's got 3 stories, so it's got its own elevator, but we're working to have this one have as an issues, then we can rely on the second elevator. In addition to, we have mechanicals or our central systems on potentially the 3rd floor. So we're gonna have a pump that's 450 pounds. It's this big. Okay, let's do the stretcher. We call it the stretcher test, put a stretcher in the elevator. I can make sure it has combination with some medical professionals. And here's the size of the pump.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Let's make sure this pump fits, because it's gotta go upstairs, it's gotta go out the door, and it's gotta be around these spaces. So we're doing a lot of mechanical versus
yes,
emergency personnel and staff and
perfect.
students, and everybody kind of has their wishes, but if we can do it right the first time,
Yeah,
now's the opportunity.
great, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols. You started at 7:09. It is now 7:13. And I see Board Member Vandermeulen has a second round of questions.
Yes, thank you. I know you can't open the windows in certain buildings. Now, what happens with having watched way too much sci-fi growing up and HAL and being sealed into a building a la Space Odyssey? I always wonder what happens when the technology fails and you can't open a window and you're trapped. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I honestly would like to know, do we have a way to get out in an emergency if you can't open the window, or if there's a fire, how do do you just use the normal emergency exit? I know I sounded humorous when I first said it, but to be honest, I don't know how you'd get out.
Point of order, Board Member Vandermeulen, can I add to your question?
Yeah,
A few years ago, a student put pepper spray in the air vents at one of our schools. I don't know if you all remember this. But I'm curious about how like a scenario that is the rebellious spirit of an adolescent child gets managed similar to the implications that Board Member Vandermeulen is leaning into.
They won't have such unit events that you have now where you can kind of, it pulls air in and it's more centralized, right? This is. If there is a fire point, right? Those windows can be broken. right? They are not bulletproof or resistant proof. You can throw a chair and you're out. Yours able to do that. However, in new building designs, it is all about escape paths and routes, right? Sometimes an old building, you have to go really long way to get out the door. It's just how the fire code was much different back then. And they've been adapted over time. These have exit ways in each house level, so not only can you get out to the main hallway, there's an escape door down the stairwell and get out. So there's like 75 feet, I think is the rule. I don't know the exact number, I think it's 75 feet. There's gotta be an exit way. Right, so you have multiple points of exit and multiple points of entry, but at entry point, they're secured. So if you can get out, get in, you can.
That is good to know. My other issue is going to be on the one elevator at Cherokee. And here's the thing that I worry about. Now, I'm not an expert in design, so please don't get me wrong. But I know when you put an elevator shaft, it's normally easier, from what I've read at least, to put it in the middle and then move things around it. And I think that that's a solid plan and good idea. But I understand why Martha's concerned. Is there ways we can make sure of when an elevator does go down, because even the best, most well cared for one, and I thank Nichelle for raising this because I didn't even think of it, even the best, most careful elevator can fail. I don't want one of our students not to be able to get up or down. And so I was wondering, do we have contingency plans? And that's what I'm curious on. That's all.
Yeah, so we do have preventative maintenance programs with all of our new elevators. The same thing with our high schools. We've had a couple of them get tripped out or somebody jumps in the elevator at the wrong time and blocks the doors. It takes about an hour response and they're typically back up, especially new elevators. Now we've got one at Henderson that's end of life elevator. They're actually part of our replacement plan is to get it within the next year and it failed. Those are the times where you have to get hard parts because it's obsolete, right? You're buying parts to make another part, then you gotta make that other part to make it fit in the old elevator. So those are the contingencies we see in their older buildings. Now with new elevators, they're much different. They're different, built much differently than the past elevators. And for example, at Cherokee, if someone needs to go upper level, it is even with second floor. So you can actually go outside if you needed to and using access to second floor. If, for example, it wouldn't work. So you have some access there. Senate, not so much.
Okay.
But again, we're relying on same as technology and there's ways to move students around. Yeah, it's kind of the fault you have anywhere, right? You win some.
And Chair, I know I said that was it, but I do have one tiny little promise. Because I've been keeping it short. I really have. But my last actual question is this, is I know these buildings are going to last 40, 50, 60, 70 years. And I don't know what our future student capacity is. I don't know what technology is. If we're moving heavy equipment, how things are going to do. Will one elevator be able to suffice in the future? And that's just something to think about. I don't even require an answer. That's just what I'm curious. How do we make sure that it is ready for the world of tomorrow and for our students of tomorrow? And that's all I've got. Thank you, Chair, for your grace.
Thank you for your questions, Board Member Vandermeulen. You started to ask questions at 7:13. It is now 7:18. I will add myself to the stack to just say I really appreciated you emphasizing the art spaces. And I'm hoping we can speak to how spaces convert into spaces we use for theater and dance. Because I think we have students who are talented and gifted in a variety of areas, and that includes the arts. And I want our young people to get to have exceptional experiences in that regard. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. I am hoping when we have this conversation, moving forward, we can talk about the sensory experience of our students and things like kind of interior lighting and kind of setting the tone and the culture through the space to a greater extent. Thank you for talking about the sledding hill. Thank you for talking about the tree. I think there is a real reverence for the things that make a community unique and meaningful. And it's really, I really appreciate getting to see this project from that perspective. I also just have to say, it's tremendously impressive to see the speed and rate at which these projects are coming to life. It feels tremendously fast, and so I want you to know that's not something I take for granted as somebody who got to see our last referendum move at a very different rate and renovating 4 schools in comparison to building 10. And so I'm endlessly impressed with you all and your ability to bring this to fruition for our community. Thank you for your work. Let's talk about the budget.
All right, this will hopefully be short. All right, here's. Wanna work for me?
Jesse has the work update.
Ah, here we go. So we're at GMP time. So here's our preliminary construction cost of our building. Add in all the cost of work, all the contingency works you can see put in there. Again, we're intending not to use a contingency, but we're still in the building phase, right? So we're still moving earth, we are still putting stuff in the ground. And those are there as the safe points to make sure we don't have to come back to you. I promise you, I'm not coming back to the board, and I'm gonna try to do everything I can not to stand up to that, and also turn that money around into what comes out to phase 3 and phase 2. So there's kind of a generalized cost of construction for Shabazz Sherman site and Blackhawk and Gompers. They're pretty close and comparable. Again, Blackhawk Gompers is a much bigger school. So we're doing pretty good cost wise. So next slide talks about just kind of how we were and how we are. So initial assumptions were $85 million spent on Sherman Shabazz and 94 million on Blackhawk Gompers. We're coming in with the GMPs about 75,350,000 and 81. So yes, we are doing okay. Again, allowing the classrooms that we work with principals to have, making sure they're working through the curriculum instruction. We're not cutting them short on spaces they've asked for, and also fitting the constraints of the site. So the 75.3 and 81.1 is the number we will lock in at for these 2 particular sites. That includes FF&E, which is furniture fixtures, and all of the site work that will come with playgrounds and blacktopping and all that fun that comes. So we are doing fairly decent on budget. On phase 2, our initial buildings right now, really at the cost of our buildings in phase 2, Tokyo Orchard Ridge is up. Cherokee is up a little bit and Senate is up a little bit. Now I'll preface on Cherokee and Senate. Part of the initial ref work was not talking a lot about classroom numbers for DLI, ELI. So a lot of that's come back in programming and also adding square foot performance spaces and adding more amenities to our facilities in the arts. And we're still working through designs, right? This is our kind of our SD budget numbers.
Okay.
Since then, we've brought them down a little bit. We've kind of worked some challenges in and out of those sites, just because this was the early numbers, right? As we get kind of more into the bidding cycle and the fall, these numbers will kind of shore up to be what they are. And Tokyo Orchard Ridge, we know we are very large on the building, so we're working on trying to bring that down. Kind of let it grow up a little bit and kind of what does it all fit? And we're like, okay, this is the reality. This is kind of the reality and working with principles. And you always want to see what you can get. And you're like, okay, so let's balance this back out. So it is high. We expect to come back down. And as you can see, we are still trending very well. And again, holding contingencies, right? So there is about a 10% contingency in all of the phase 2 school commerciums because we haven't got the final design, right? So they're kind of assuming, I'm going to assume the worst until I get the actual what it's going to be made of and how it's going to work. So as we start to shore up, those numbers are kind of shrink back down, very similar to what you saw in phase 1. They started out high and we started to whittle back, right? So those numbers short through, and then it'll leave us opportunities to actually see what we can do in phase 3 of the next phase of that project as we start engaging phase 3 3 days from now. So welcome to my world. So we are kicking off phase 3 with actual internal engagements, and then we start principal engagements in like 2 weeks. So for phase 3. So we're already starting to shape out what phase 3 will look like, how it will look, how it will work, what's possible, what's the dreams tell us to do, and see what we're seeing in phase 1 and phase 2 as they start to show up in phase 2. We're starting to develop that picture. What does phase 3 look like? we have decisions to make, right? So we are very active, but still the goal, it will be 507, right? We cannot spend more than the voters of. And we're on target. We're doing, I would say we're doing okay. Some political world around us, but I think it's been holding so far. Very active.
Dude,
Don't.
yeah,
Our team's doing a really, really good job.
well, pass that on to the team,
We are,
man.
we're very conscious, that's for sure.
Got a couple more for us?
All right, that's on my slides for 507.
All right, I saw board member Mosner Thaltham.
I think this looks incredibly impressive and I'm really grateful. So I'm gonna ask you a question that you've heard me ask lots and lots of people, which is besides the generosity of taxpayers, what is making this possible in your team and where are you finding roadblocks?
What makes it possible is we check egos at the door. It's not about any of us, it's about the kids, and what's right for the kids in the community. That's kind of the standing point. We understand people are a for-profit business, we're not. So you're right, we align those expectations. We have a very good conversations in those respects. Gotten saying no. Right, there's a lot of difficult conversation. We still have those, right? But at the end of the day, we have to balance the budget and we have to get the needs of the building in, and not necessarily the wants. Right, so that's a difficult conversation a lot of folks have a challenge with, and I still kind of try to explain why and what decision we have to make. Equity is essential of a building. It's equity across everything, right? Although it's nice to have, and I'd love to put it there. Why shall you have something different than what I've done other places? And also, can you use something over here that's just like it? Maybe it's across the hall, right? And then rearranging something across the hall that fits better purposes for all. So there's a lot of like those conversation of balancing kind of the internal hopes that they have versus like, hey, let's try to work with you, but here's the alternative. Look at this and not have to add costs, right? And everybody gets to do something.
And something when you say that, the thing that it makes me think about is like, say, okay, well, it would be nice to have, but we have to have the basics, we have to have the needs. And then the magic gets added and all the people go in buildings. And it makes me wonder like, okay, like what does it look like to support that part also really effectively? I think this looks really good and I really appreciate that you're here and your work and your team. That's it.
Thank you, board member Mosner Thaltham. Any other questions in relationship to the budget? All right, seeing none, I just want to clarify from what you just showed us, it looks like we are ahead of schedule and under budget.
On budget.
On budget.
And we are ahead of schedule on phase 2 for the first 2 schools, Senate and Cherokee. Purposely done that way to allow for when we're doing construction costs in phase 1, when they start to finish, there's opportunity when we go back to bid, they're like, hey, I'm going here, I'm going to be aggressive to get phase 2. Or those who didn't get phase 1 can still pull the work into their schedules and not be so far out, right? There are specific timing events which we're working to maximize that leverage piece. And then there's also a gap in Madison construction. That's a little gap right now. So getting that in now before everything starts to go vertical again is always the key.
It's really helpful to take into consideration all of the factors that inform our ability to pace this project in partnership with other folks, right? Like we don't just determine the
100%.
speed. There's an element of the
100%.
availability of the workforce that is employed to do this. And I just want to say that these referendums employ thousands of people across the district. And I think I want to remember that I'm so grateful to our community for passing the referendum, and also that these referendums allow for us to invest back into Madison and into the businesses that make these buildings possible. The last thing I want to say about the budget is, and it gets into kind of the next conversation we're having. So I guess it's a question for both you, which is, how do we as a board use our more general budget to maintain these projects in the long run? How are we factoring that into what we're building in terms of what it takes to maintain them? And is there a way to build that minimizes the cost of maintenance?
Yeah, so all the materials that we've chosen have a longevity, one, and two, minimal cost to keep going, right? I can go at this beautiful thing that it's gonna fall apart in 5 years, right? So there's a big balance in that materiality part of that. Now, with bigger buildings, we'll require more custodial staff, right? So those are the balances we're looking at is can we put automation like we've done at our high school, floor scrubbers and things like that to help offset some of that heavy work, but also focus on detail. Right? We always like to see the detail in work. So we're still working through the square footage finalization pieces, and there will be an operational piece that will have to support the building. Now, when you get to new building versus old, like we're spending a lot of time fixing mechanicals in old buildings and all. So new buildings with geothermal, there are some maintenance parts of that, but we're also designing the building like, hey, disconnect that pump, pull it out, put a new one in, right? So we're building some of that work in to save that long-term cost. We know upfront it's a little more expensive. But as trades get more tougher to have and those skill sets become scarce, it becomes a lot easier to maintain buildings, and doing the right work at the right sequencing is all about the matter how to make those buildings really come to life and not shoot you in the end where it's, hey, this was great, then bang, now your building's down because of whatever reasons, right? So we've really balanced sustainability and maintaining.
Thank you for your response to my questions. I started asking questions at 7:29. It is now 7:31. If there are no further questions from board members, we'll move into our last discussion of the evening, which is our 2026, 2027. I'm sorry.
I got CEP.
2 more questions.
CEP.
Sorry. So sorry, you're right there.
Fair.
We're gonna talk about.
Speaking of 2 more things and it being 7:31, I'd like to move.
I am for it. Let's have a 5-minute recess. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye. We're back from a 5-minute recess. We'll dive for a conversation.
Dan Bush is gonna be joining us remotely. He's on, so.
Yep.
Welcome, Dan.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the accommodation. Let me participate remotely.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you again for giving us some of your time this evening. We're going to go through a couple of things, some are pretty basic housekeeping things, but important for you to see in detail. The first slide we're going to show you, every year we review our paid meal prices. We are required by DPI to use what is called the paid lunch equity tool. It's at their discretion. This year, we are required to use this tool to recalculate or reassess our paid lunch prices. That's the table you see here before you now. We are recommending to you an increase in everything except reduced, of course. That is a protected category that cannot raise above 40 cents. And as you know, I think the district has long funded the reduced price breakfast. So there is no price applicable to that. There's no price. I don't want to really read this table to you because it's fairly straightforward, but I did want to ask if there are questions about either the paid lunch equity tool or the prices we're recommending. Seeing none at this time, I will proceed. A few main points of the projected 26-27 nutrition budget. The current projected fiscal year 27 Fund 10 subsidy is $3.75 million, which assumes, as the subpoints articulate, assumes full staffing all year. May or may not be the case. And then a note too about the previous year's projected subsidy and the actuals as we see them now. We're coming towards the end of the year, so we'll see the real reconciliation soon. But just to note that the 25-26 fall approved subsidy was 3.23 million. The estimated actuals are on trend for something more in the neighborhood of 2.7, 2.9. So that may help set some context for subsidies coming up into the next year too. We do not have any information currently about the USDA reimbursement rate changes, which is a key lever in our financial projections. This is not necessarily unusual. Timing is just not in our favor in this case. They normally come out in July and we're needing to have this discussion now. So be it. So we do not have that key metric to use in our projections right now, but our current projection assumes that there will not be an increase. So we are not banking on it, just so you know this about the current projection you're looking at. And then the last couple of bullet points are a segue into the next couple of slides for which Dan Butch is going to take lead. The estimated cost to continue our current CEP or community eligibility provision schools, so no change to the group of 17 we now have, would be $465,500 for the year. And hearkening back to the previous discussion, the reason that's the case is because we have a contract that's rolling and we will have lower identified student percentage, which does affect our claim rates. It affects the revenue that's available in claims from those schools. Unless there are questions on this slide, I don't want to go too fast, so I'll pause for any questions on this slide before we go a little deeper into CEP. We do have a couple of questions. Let's see.
Board Member Nichols.
Thank you. When you were with us, I think back in March, you had said at that point in the year, you were thinking that the Fund 10 subsidy might end up, or at least the way I wrote it, closer to 2.4 to 2.5. Looks like here you're now thinking your estimated actuals will be trending closer to 2.7 up to the 2.9, which is less than what we had allocated, but I'm just curious what between March and now has changed that estimated trend up.
I will say, I think a key factor, and Dan, you may want to weigh in here too. April was a fairly soft month for us in terms of the revenue. We haven't seen the financials for May. March was also, I think the date of that
operations work group fell while we were still in March, right? So March was also a month where we lost revenue due to spring break. Dan, do you want to comment a little further on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I mean, we have since then lost a couple of days of service between the blizzard that we had in March, where we lost a day of school and then attendance was soft a bit, and then the day off May 1st. If we don't have school, that's roughly $30,000 to $40,000 in revenue that we lose. So just kind of that. Having less serving plays a part in that. Food inflation trending up a little bit, potentially, that plays a part of that. I mean, it's sort of within the context of the whole school year. It's kind of as we get closer to the end of the year, we go from trends to reality. So that comes up a bit, but I think since then, probably those two key drivers were just March was April was, I mean, overall a good month, but March, kind of between the way the calendar fell and then the sort of unexpected weather that we have, definitely March was not a great month for us financially and number of meals served wise. So I think that's kind of what's driving that down a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I misspoke. So to correct myself, April was a fairly strong revenue month. March was not.
Yes. Yep.
Board Member Saravo, you also have a question? And we're a couple slides into this presentation and there are just a couple more before discussion. Do you want to speak to something that's come up now, or are you speaking to the entire presentation? Okay.
Something that's on the specific slide. Thank you for the clarification, Chair. The bottom part that says lower identified student percentage, is that something is that what families are reporting that makes them where's the eligibility and the information from family come into play with identifying students under that?
Identified student percentage is a really specific category that is not actually directly tied to applications. Identified student percentage is based on eligibility, direct certification. That helps.
Yeah, and that was the discussion we had last month, kind of going through that. And I think that's a good segue to our next slide to talk about kind of updated picture on CEP for the year. So again, just to review, for CEP, it's different than the free and reduced eligibility that we use with traditional National School Lunch Program. An identified student is one who is identified either by their status, being foster, experiencing homelessness, or statuses like that, or if they are directly certified as eligible for programs like Medicaid and SNAP. So as we talked about last month, with some of the recent changes in federal law, both with the change of administration and then coming out of the pandemic and some of the pandemic provisions about Medicaid, that percentage has been trending downward. So the data on this slide, these are updated since a month ago. This is the more current data from the DPI certification, which will be used in the contract that we come up with. And I've kind of broken it down a little bit based on the discussion from last month. So Board President Castro had asked about kind of how we group the schools and how we kind of manage that eligibility, given that, like, as I mentioned, kind of halfway between the 50% and the 75% line on the graph, there's sort of this magic level where the way that CEP works, you get fully paid out above that line. So trying to manage that eligibility to get as close to an average of 62.5% without going over. So looking at the groups that we have, the 7 schools on the left, that's kind of what I'm calling CEP Group 1. Their identified percentage is a shade under 60%. And then we also talked last month about how that percentage travels through a formula to get at what is effectively a reimbursement rate per meal. So for that group with that high a percentage, we'd be looking at an effective reimbursement, again, based on the current USDA rate, since we don't have the new ones yet, of $4.54 per lunch in that group. The CEP Group 2, those are the red bars. Those are all of our remaining current CEP schools. I will say CEP Group 1 does include rolling Kennedy into that group. Kennedy is that last yellow bar of all the schools in the district. They're really the one that's kind of moved up through the rankings by identified student percentage over the past several years, unsurprisingly, since CEP took effect. So that's kind of where our first group stops, is with Kennedy there. Group 2 is the remaining schools that have been in CEP for multiple contract periods now. Their identified percentage based on the DPI data is down to 42.7%, which might not seem like a huge jump from the 59.9% in the first group, but that does have a big impact on the effective reimbursement, where we're getting about $1.20, $1.15, $1.20 per lunch less for all meals in those schools in CEP compared to Group 1. Also looking at Muir and Whitehouse, mentioned as candidates last month. Those are the two kind of lighter blue bars close to the yellow bars in the graph. They're right at 50%, which would be a $3.88 reimbursement. And then board member Pearson also asked about East and La Follette. So illustrating those in the chart as well. Those are the darker blue bars. They are at 40%, and their effective lunch rate would be $3.21 reimbursement from the feds. Finally, all the gray bars are non-CEP schools. Lowest percentage, averaging at 29.2%, which would be a $2.50 effective reimbursement per lunch. So updated numbers with the data from DPI, overall a bit lower than the preliminary numbers we shared last month, but financially did not really change the picture much at all. So the next slide basically kind of sequences out sort of what these different components of CEP are. So we've got kind of six lines on the list. The baseline is our Fund 10 subsidy less CEP. So before we get into the costs associated with those different groups from the last slide, we're looking at sort of a baseline, almost $3.3 million operating subsidy from Fund 10 to the Food Service Fund. That first CEP group, those 7 schools, the yellow bars on the graph, we've got, instead of doing a participation percentage, I have this listed as the average enrollment this year, and then the average number of lunches served per day to kind of contextualize that a little bit better than a percentage does, because that doesn't account for school size, et cetera. In that CEP group of schools, we're feeding about 2/3 of the kids, 1,400 lunches out of 2,100 enrolled in those 7 schools. And just by themselves, if we continued CEP with only them, we'd actually be looking at a very slight revenue increase. So that's why kind of the cost number is negative, because that's a slight increase, because their percentage by themselves is high enough that the rate would be a little bit better than we're getting now with all of our CEP schools, because those are based on the data that were in place 4 years ago. So then that last column is kind of the running total as you go down line by line. So the individual lines of projected cost have their own sort of isolated cost, and then we kind of total them as we expand CEP. Group 2, which are the remaining current schools, this is kind of what went into our budget projection, is assuming status quo. So the first 3 lines on this chart. Group 2, a little bit lower participation rate than Group 1, about 2,300 lunches out of 3,850 students. So that's not quite 2/3, that's closer to 60%. But because of that lower effective rate from the change in their identified student percentage, the cost for serving those schools projected at $511,400. And that's kind of the cost driver of continuing CEP in our current schools, is because our overall percentage has lessened. It's really those schools that are farther away from that 60% identified student percentage. That's kind of where that reimbursement rate really comes into play. Muir and Whitehorse as candidates, enrollment 866, about 411 lunches on average served per day this year. Projected cost is relatively small, about $52,000 for those 2 schools. But East and La Follette, by comparison, you've got essentially 4 times as many students, but about half again as many lunches. And that's just a reflection of the much lower school lunch program participation in our high schools versus our middle and elementary schools. So at Easton La Follette, we wouldn't be getting as many lunches kind of per school or per effect, but all 3,400 students go into the percentage calculation, which brings down the reimbursement rate further. That's where that cost estimate of $271,000 for adding Easton La Follette comes in. And then if we went the rest of MMSD, again, another 1.8 million on top of all of that, which would bring the subsidy for the food service program to almost $6 million in total. So we wanted to kind of outline it this way for you to better clarify sort of the impact of the different scenarios we were talking about, and that we're going from a baseline of our food service program that if the federal government doesn't put any more money in is going to go a bit farther into deficit, and then that there are costs of continuing with CEP or expanding it further. So I hope this chart kind of makes it clearer than I think it was last month. But that's really about all that we have. So I think the next slide is just asking questions, but we probably want to leave it on this one because I'm sure some of you will have questions on this.
Thank you. Questions from my fellow board members? Board Member Nichols and then Board Member Mosner-Feltham.
Yes, thank you for bringing back this information and the way you laid it out. So right now, I just want to make sure I'm confirming, like status quo would still be continuing the group 1 that we saw in the yellow and the group 2 that had, was it the red? Or
Yeah. So if you can go back a slide,
bars?
yes. Continuing would be the 7 schools in the yellow bars and then the 10 schools in the red bars. Correct.
Okay. Then when I look at Muir and Whitehorse, I look at them graphically and they're the 2 light blue bars.
The light blue ones. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And they look like they're in a similar place as many of the other group 2 schools.
Correct.
Okay. And it looks like based on the average lunches, there's a fairly good participation from what I can see.
Yeah, this is in the 2 schools currently, they're at about 40, that's about 45%, 46%, which is average to a bit above average for MMSD.
Okay. And then you're projecting. Okay. Now, when we get to East and La Follette, I know that there was some interest from board members about thinking about how do we expand CEP to high schools, but when I look at the comparison of students enrolled versus how many would actually participate in the lunches, that's a pretty big drop. So I'm not sure how you have them at 40% in the ISP. I know maybe I'm not articulating it correctly, but
Yeah, because the ISP has nothing to do with who does or does not eat lunch.
okay,
The
right.
ISP is based entirely on the status of the student. So
Okay,
kind of as I was saying, where all 3,410 students at Easton La Follette are contributing to that ISP and contributing to the overall percentage, but only about 1 in 5 of them are actually eating lunch where they would be impacted.
Okay. And I guess my question is, do you think, or do we think that if it was available and there was more education and, I don't know, deliberate conversations with students, I'm just thinking about like Easton La Follette right now, that like that participation would go up? I guess it's hard for me to, yeah, it's hard for me to know like what that would look like at a high school. I know we're also, I don't want to say competing, but we're kind of competing with open campus lunch. So,
Yeah, and I think our experience with CEP over the past several years, and I'll kind of talk, and then Josh and Scott certainly you jump in as well. But our experience with CEP expansion is that it's certainly not a case of if you make it free, they will all come. In Kennedy, adding Kennedy for CEP this year, we saw like a 10% jump in participation, but that was with a full court press of everybody in the building, leadership, teachers, students. Like there was a lot of advocacy for CEP, and that moved the participation needle 10%, which was good, but it certainly isn't anything close to, feeding everybody or nearly everybody. So at Easton La Follette, I mean, I think if CEP was available and there was some education, sure, we might see an increase. But I think the two things that are challenging there are, number one, that's getting the effective reimbursement rate below our cost of providing meals. So actually, when you boost percentage at schools when you boost participation at schools with low percentages, it actually ends up costing you more as you expand because you're not getting reimbursed for each meal the way that you are at the schools with the higher percentages. And on top of that, of course, those buildings aren't built for everyone to eat, and our program isn't built for everyone to eat as well with our open campus lunch and our physical facilities that we have.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dan. So is Muir and Whitehorse on here? Well, tell me why Muir and Whitehorse were added on here specifically.
Yep. So kind of as part of the discussion of where CEP was going, on that ranked list, they are the next two schools. Whitehorse would be partly an operational piece, since Schenck is already a CEP school. So that would kind of simplify operations and reduce cash handling in that school. I think Muir would be our first West Side school, and I think we're all aware of the challenges that Muir's had over the past several years, but they're kind of next in line of, if the board wanted to expand, that would be the most likely candidate on the West Side.
Okay. And the running total, my last question, the running total is what you would be saying to the board we should build into the budget. So let's just say we went with the two status quo, cohort one, group one, group two, and let's say we wanted to expand to the next two ranked schools, Muir and Whitehorse. We would add in that $52,100. Bob would budget in a placeholder for the 3.8, but it may come under that. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And right now, Bob, I know we're not quite there, but what is built into the budget right now for
The 3.75.
so the 3.75 with, okay, groups 1 and 2 are what's in the budget?
Status quo, correct.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols. Board Member Mosner-Theltham.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for the information. I really appreciate this month and last month or 2 months ago. I have a much deeper understanding now, and I appreciate that a lot. I'd be curious. I know that Board Member Pearson asked for East and La Follette. La Follette's ISP is higher, if I remember from last time, 43.5 versus East 41.3, so pretty similar actually. I am interested in seeing, especially at La Follette, what would happen if we could find a way to fund that additional expansion, because like you said, at Kennedy, it's not a magic wand. You can only lunch. My school is a CEP school. And there's lots of kids who don't eat. It's free. I remind them every day and they're just like, nah, for whatever combination of reasons. But I am curious to see what, where there is a group of people who are dedicated to this and want to see it go, what would happen. I don't think that necessarily means we'd have to commit to it forever and ever, but I'm curious about that. Did you see? You're gonna say?
Yeah, I'm wondering if, kind of hearing your train of thought through that, we could look at the 3,410, knowing that several of them are eligible already, wouldn't have to qualify any differently. if we were CEP. Perhaps another way we could address this is see if we can raise the 785 to a place where we believe would be financially viable for us to consider CEP.
You think you're saying try before you commit the money.
So increase participation first.
Yeah, and we should across the board. I mean, Josh and his team, and Scott, I think they're all working really hard at doing that, but until we can kind of get to that place where, you know, we have that 10-year plan, and it'd be nice for us to stay kind of within that at this point and really put the efforts into getting participation out.
The 10-year plan also helps me understand a lot more,
9 years now.
a lot more details. And I really appreciate the transparency with that this department has brought in these conversations.
If I could just add, those students that are free and reduced that do need to get a lunch already get it free.
Oh, no, I know that.
So Barry, I just want to, some people are like,
Oh, sure.
this takes it away. This actually.
No.
Take it away. It's just.
100%. Yep. What I'm meaning is like, what would it look like to put a school that wants to increase participation, that wants to decrease stigma, that wants to build out around both the students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch and aren't taking it, and students who may not be eligible and aren't taking it? What would it look like to give them flexibility to say, hey, we did this thing, we have this thing available this year that we're actually gonna shift our culture around that. I mean, LaFell is the soul of the city, right? That's your tagline. What would that look like to say, yeah, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. So I'm curious about that. In particular, I think those are our comments and not questions.
The numbers are pretty close. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. It'd be about a 50% split. You do one, you're at, 100.
Yeah, it's really close to half and half. One's got a slightly lower percentage, but a little bit higher participation. But yes, so it would be about 130, 140 for each school. But that also, kind of adds the challenge of, with their lower percentages in the rest of the group, that brings the rate down further as well to kind of where, below where our just marginal cost of a meal would be. So, I mean, there are cases where it even necessarily more percentage wouldn't lead to making it more viable because, again, we're not, at those levels of the identified students. That's not really what CEP was ever designed for.
Right.
That's just kind of where they're at. So it's a, it's a 6-figure financial cost for either school, kind of no matter what we do at this point.
Yeah, so to clarify it, if it's 140,000 now number, and we get higher participation, the number can go to 160,000, 180,000 lower, like more cost. We're not getting enough reimbursement to cover the meal.
Oh, yeah,
And that's
that's
on
right.
Yep.
So it's actually a double negative, like not a good negative, but it's like you get negative.
Yeah.
The better you do.
Sure.
Yes.
I see it.
Of it.
Yes. I'm finding this really, really interesting, and I'm really grateful that we're having this conversation around a shared vision of increasing participation and changing how MSD students relate to school lunch.
So-
Thank you for the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to support Dr. Gothard's point. We've spent a lot of the last part of the year meeting with principals in CEP schools to talk about elevating the culture and amplifying it of participation, and we've seen some great results from that. And I think in some ways, the fiscal question and the social and civic questions are very tied together. But destigmatizing school meals, I think, can be and is something we're seeing principals take action on. And that's just to support the vision of saying, let's open that pathway before taking the limited line. So it works. I think we're starting to see some of that.
Okay, so I guess I just think about it the opposite way, and obviously you're the expert, so I'm not saying my way is right, but I would think like to be able to meaningfully shift the culture with a little bit of elbow room. Like, okay, let's do it all together. But you're saying it doesn't happen that way, and I totally believe that. Like I said, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. I feel way better informed about what the actual questions on the table are. And I feel really grateful that in this room, but also whoever's watching or whoever's going to tune in tomorrow, that across our community, we have people interested in that. So I feel like this is a high leverage, interesting, worthwhile thing to keep on understanding and keep on moving with. So thanks.
The last quick little detail is because high schools have one lunch period, 1 hour. So as you push, there's a lot of students into one space. If it goes, you may have curriculum challenges of trying to support office hours and the side stuff that goes on.
When I imagine what it would potentially look like for MMSD to say, we are making a culture of not having an open session. I'm not saying I want to do this, I'm saying when I imagine it, like, there's no way the service model could just be everybody goes to the cafeteria. Like there's just literally no potential way. That doesn't, I'm not there at all. Not at all.
Point of order, I just want to remind board members, we have a series of options in front of us. And we have to, as a group, kind of direct our administration, incorporate an option or hybrid of options into the budget we're gonna pass at the end of the month. So, board member Mosner-Feltham, I just wanna make sure I be correct in saying you want us to go with the option that includes Muir and White House, and you want us to explore the potential of including the Fallen.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Board member Nichols, you wanna,
I'd be interested in adding the Muir and White Horse. At this point, and trying to think of some other ways, I think at the high school level that aren't necessarily about CEP, but about trying to increase participation overall before we invest more, just because of the Fund 50 balance situation anyway. But it seems like because Muir and White Horse are the next kind of two ranked schools, they would help us expand, and they're still below kind of that effective rate, but I would be interested in those two.
To follow up on what you said, the housekeeping details here, they're just a few days different. I will file our contract application on the 26th of this month. And I will look to indicate which schools we are interested. It's a little bit strange, but a few days later on the 30th is the letter of intent for CEP. Ideally, though, I will file that contract application knowing what your recommendation will be.
okay.
I hope that helps.
So we've heard from two board members pretty clearly saying what they're hoping for. Board member Saravo, I saw your hand up. I know you might have questions that are not specific to that indicator, but if you don't mind including that in your feedback tonight, it'll help us know where we're going at the end of the month.
I will try. Thank you, Chair Mildred. A lot of where I'm resonating is like the application, like what's happening in the schools. I guess it's the interaction with it. Why aren't they doing more? Because the one consistency that I hear directly from the students is how long the line is to get through. So like decision-making in real time with the note of the amount of time given. And then I'm also just being cognizant with the fall that they have their second chance breakfast, but then I don't know how close that is to lunch. So I don't know if just getting to school and then the lunch hour seems like it was just immediately then, and then what happens to those kids? Like when are they eating? There's a lot of factors at play, right? Where I'm unsure if the best way I can make this make sense is like when I'm going to go shopping and I'm thinking about Walmart, I'm thinking I'm gonna do it by myself. And I'm not gonna have a lot of people to help me. If I go to Woodman's, there's lots of people around. I can get stuff a lot faster and it's more effective. And so when I'm thinking of like how are things moving and how do you keep people moving in a space is when you have more points of contact. So I'm curious as to what creativity is yet out there to have more.
I would say a lot on it. So I'd say it's something we're constantly working on is looking at this. I would say what you're pointing to is service aspects. How smooth, how fast is the service? without being something that's so fast that it feels like you're being rushed through, right? The
That
idea.
it's making anything less than what it, making it less palatable, I guess. is the
Yeah,
best word.
it shouldn't feel like you're being pushed through a line, but if it's taking, and that's something we're constantly looking at, especially in a situation like you're talking about in the high schools. This is your one shot, and if it ends up, because those are high pressure situations.
Yeah.
You are trying to maximize the number of students you're feeding in that one time. We have seen some really effective techniques in some of the high schools that I think we're looking at, not only how the lines are set up, sometimes increasing the number of points of service in the lines, but then looking at, it gets really fine tuned, like how are students being directed while they're waiting?
Yeah.
Are there opportunities, they can't see ahead and there's a free spot, but they can't see it, and somebody step in and help them and say that window's free right there. Something as simple as that, because human beings love to get in a straight line and suddenly you can't see anything. Like somebody to help them get to the next spot. We've seen that be really effective, and we're going to keep on working. Because we know the pressure doesn't go away for the students. It is high stakes for a lot of them, and the timing is very short.
So there's a lot going on during that lunch hour.
Yeah, there is.
At the same time.
I don't think we have the issue that you identified, the possibility of compression of you just ate breakfast an hour and a half ago in our high schools. The timing, and I know I've talked to principals who really make an effort, regardless of what their starting time is, to make sure that that's not crunched together. You can start to claim lunches as early as 10 o'clock, and sometimes we do have lunches starting at 10 o'clock or close to 10 o'clock in the younger grades, but they started much earlier. So I know there's a lot of effort to say, this isn't going to make sense if you say, because I can, we're going to schedule these meal periods 2 hours apart. That doesn't serve the students well. And I don't see that happening in our district.
Yeah, like just getting to school is very different for younger grades and the older grades too. I just know there's a lot here, so that we can't remember. Muldrow, I know you said you wanted to know like Referendum Math. I'm still figuring that out, to be quite honest, because.
Can I ask you in a pretty pointed way, Board Member Saravo, are you interested in us staying where we're at, expanding to the 2 identified schools for $52,100? Do you have interest in exploring what it looks like to expand those schools, or what it looks like to expand beyond those schools in terms of what we're funding next year?
What does expansion mean? I guess
Expansion means we would include Muir and White House and and Whitehorse as schools that are part of the program. That means universally students have access to free lunch, given that they're at a similar rate to the other schools we're already supporting.
I would say, just to add, the consequence is, right now we have a balanced budget.
Thank you.
Right?
Okay.
75110 transfer. And so if we add to that, I'm gonna want the next couple of days after this meeting to figure out, can we continue to be balanced? If we're gonna add 50,000, I would think yes. But if we add 300,000,
Right.
I'd want to spend a little bit more time, right?
Yeah.
Still developing the final details of everything for the budget, but right now it's balanced.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what the driver is to kind of change the landscape and what's needed for that. Like, I know you guys have been working on something, but like what's working and like how do we working? Like how do we focus on those things?
The work that Josh mentioned is a continued conversation, not with just principals, but teachers, community village builders, social workers, everyone at the school, adults and families, participate.
Yeah.
Get our rates up to start covering more of our costs to provide the meals. And it's an 8-year turnaround plan, right? It's a solvent cost for food and nutrition covered by our revenues for food and nutrition. That 3.75 means our costs are higher by 3.75. We're not collecting enough revenue, combination of state government, federal reimbursement, and participation.
Yeah.
And that's gonna take some time to change the culture and the learning.
Yeah. Doing stuff with bakery make an impact and.
A
Sorry.
little more at the elementary side, not so much on the high school side.
Interesting.
Elementary students are more influential, like families and teachers can get students to get involved and take and participate and work with it. Kind of get them going. High schools are adults. Yeah, I'm good. Like I had a bag of chips and a soda, I'm good. It's reality, right? It's kind of what we go against and we work with, and like, those are things we could never, they're kind of independent thinkers at that point. Younger students, and we can kind of shape what the schools, like used to eating lunch in school, like work through that process. Over time, it eventually gets to the high school. Then there's opportunity to kind of keep working as we're doing now, or continue to work with the high schools. How do we keep working year by year, or sometimes it's day by day, right? It's how do we make those points of service, and we go visit, we audit. I love to audit. We're at 17 minutes. I'll get to 7. How do we do that? There's some things we can do. We talk with the staff. We're like, what needs to change? Longer cords would help. Let's get longer cords. So those are constant conversations. I have to get, but it takes time too, right? We are focused on all levels, and again, some of our largest group of students is our elementary students. Bigger impact.
I think the important thing on this discussion is no matter what is decided on CEP, participation is going to be priority for us. And what the feds do with lunch reimbursement is going to be a big part of our financial picture for next year. And that's neither of those things change depending on what decision you make on CEP.
Thank you. I will add myself to the stack, and I'm sorry, my computer died for a moment. So if you see anybody's hand up online, tell me. Thank you. Board President Castro.
Hey, Board Member Muldrow, thank you for keeping us focused on what the team needs so we can move forward. I think I would be interested in having a long-term conversation on what needs to change or what we can do to encourage greater participation at our high schools regarding CEP status and, in my frank opinion, off-campus lunch. But for tonight's discussion and next year's decision-making, I'm in favor of adding Muir and Whitehorse.
Thank you, Board President Castro. I'm going to add myself to the stack. I agree that I think it makes sense to add Muir and White House for $52,000. I think that that's something we can pull off. I'm sorry, Whitehorse. Oh man. I think that's something we can pull off pretty reasonably, and I agree with Board Members Nichols, Mosner Thutham, and Castro. That I think that seems reasonable moving into next year. I am curious about exploring what this could look like at La Follette in the long run, and what it would look like to pilot it. And I appreciate Board President Castro speaking to what that could look like in terms of off-campus lunch. I do want to remind folks that we didn't consistently have one lunch period for all of our high schools throughout the entirety of our history. When I went to school at East, lowerclassmen ate at one point in time and upperclassmen ate at another point in time. And there was a real effort to keep the younger high school students on campus. And so I think we might wanna remember that we have options and we have flexibility in relationship to this conversation. And I think next year, you know, for this budget, I'm in favor of adding Muir and Whitehorse. Board Member Nichols.
Thank you, Chair Muldrow. I just wanted to say this, because I know, Bob, we're getting close to getting all the budget numbers ready for a vote. The one reason that I just wanted to explain my thinking, the reason I'm comfortable with us adding 2 schools, Muir and Whitehorse, is one, their effective rate seems to be slightly higher than even some of the schools in Group 2. And I know that right now the estimated cost to do that, to add those 2 schools, is the $52,000. But because you all have been doing a really good job of really tracking expenses, trying to be more efficient, and you're coming in a little bit less than what was budgeted, or at least it looks that way so far, it seems like the 52,000 might still fit in what you have in the budget line. And I'm not the budget expert, you may not feel that way, but it seems like we're gonna come a little bit in under, maybe. The only other thing that I guess I could say, and again, I would leave this up to you all, it looks as though there are some schools in that group 2 that are maybe bringing that overall percentage down. So, because they're at 42.7%, whereas Muir and Whitehorse combined, now you got me going on the right
I'm so sorry.
are at 50%. So the other thing that I'd be willing to explore with you all is if you said we would actually like to replace 2 of the schools in group 2 based on information that we have today. But I don't know, you know, and pull Muir and Whitehorse up into group 2. I'd be willing to explore that as well if you were trying not to add any additional expenditures.
So those are good. So when you look at the bar graph, it's strictly on a financial conversation, right? If we were submitting a new CEP application, we would not include several of the schools currently in group 2, right?
Oh, okay.
We just don't get sufficient reimbursement, right?
Okay.
But the major premise is if you're a school participating in the CEP today, we don't want to take that option back away from families and students going to that school, right?
Agreed. I thought that we were up for a new application.
We are, but if you've had CEP in your school for the last 4 years, and then we say, next year you're not gonna have it, you're gonna have to go back to paying if you're not free.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
That's just the numbers, right? So it's balancing that. That was, our priority was to include everyone that's in CEP now, in the future, even though when you do a straight financial analysis, the ones to the right over there in the red, I would not, right? But that's just the numbers. That's not the impacts to families, students, schools. So.
No, I appreciate that point, and I hope that my comments didn't sound insensitive. I think in my head, I was thinking about something that we've done over the years with Title I funding, whereas you're looking for that threshold. And sometimes some schools are in Title I and then they move out after a couple of years. But I would completely agree that if you've been a school that has been a CEP school, you wouldn't necessarily want to like just take that away. So then I stand by adding Muir and Whitehorse. All right.
If there's no further questions or comments from board members, I'm prepared for our last item on the agenda this evening, our 2026-2027 budget.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm glad we got some clarity on this. It sounds like we made a lot of progress on that, so I appreciate that.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay.
Okay, so I will go quickly through these slides. Some of these are repeats. I've updated a couple of them. We're in the timeline right now. So this is where I say, even though spending a lot of time on that May proposed budget and the June preliminary budget, it's very important, but there are many things that are going to change June and October, right? We'll get, hopefully, and we'll get eventually the USDA reimbursements for food and nutrition. We still haven't received our allocation for IDEA, district by district level. We have heard from DPI overall statewide. We're up about 1% in terms of IDEA funding statewide this for next year projected compared to this year. So I believe that means we're going to get at least an IDEA funding 26-27 as we have in 25-26. That's a bright spot. We have the third Friday September count. We're going to get real equalized values from DOR on early fall. And then on October 15th, DPI will certify that general aids number. And also we'll get the final revenue limit to allow us really to set that property tax, right? So there are a lot of factors still in play. Saying all that, we have to make some assumptions. We have to make some projections, which we have done. And the budget is balanced for 26-27. Expenditures will be equaling revenues. I'm gonna look closer, but as we talked about in terms of the Fund 50 subsidy, 52,100 in terms of the total operations is more of a rounding error participation than anything versus a true hole in the budget that I would consider. That includes a balanced budget for the preliminary budget of the 3.9 million that Kate and Jennifer talked about at the start of tonight's meeting, right? So that required quite a bit of work over the last couple of weeks in terms of looking at expenditures, tightening down the budgeting on some of those costs, re-estimating the revenues, but overall, a balanced budget. And I want to spend a little bit more time talking about the balanced budget since we are talking about some potential amendments, not only for 25-26, but also 26-27. My priority is, as I believe I've been directed by the board and Dr. Gothard and senior administration, is to continue to put forth a balanced budget where our ongoing expenditures are equal to our ongoing revenues. So our goal is to be at $100.7 million in a Fund 10 balance. Stays within the board's 12 to 18%. A conversation that we were having earlier about adding 3.7 million to 25-26 would put us in a structural deficit. All right. Can the board vote to put us in a structural deficit? Yes, you can. We have sufficient fund balance to cover that, but that would be, to me, against the direction that I've been working on for 6 months to not only have a balanced budget for 25-26, but also in the 26-27, right? So any new amendments beyond what we talked about tonight, it would put us in structural deficit for this fiscal year and likely a structural deficit for 26-27. Now, saying that for 26-27, I talked about all the things that are going to change between July 1 and October 15th, right? So if there are amendments you want us to continue to look at and cost out for potential adding in October, depending where the revenues end up being overall, that would, I think, would be open. But as of right now, I really prefer not having a preliminary budget in June at the end of this month. That's not balanced, right? I do not want a structural deficit, but it's your budget and you tell me if you want that. So, but I just want to put the clarity in terms of the context of these conversations, right? All right. So revenue limits, I was whining a little bit already at the last operations work group about the failed state surplus bill, because I really wanted those additional state revenues, not only for us as an organization to allow us some more flexibility to increase some programs, increase our expenditures, but probably even before that, tax relief that budget would have given us in our fall, right? I mean, so we're looking at about a $40 million levy increase in the 26-27 budget. And that subsidy bill in terms of general school aids would have provided us over $10 million, which would have been a 25% reduction in the levy from 40 to 30 million in the fall. It's a substantial decrease, right? In terms of what property taxpayers would have to pay. So I am still hopeful, optimistic, although is it likely? I'm still optimistic they'll come back to the drawing board and get something that they can still, you know, put in place before you'll have to vote on the October budget. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. The revenue limit is a 3-year rolling average. Here's the same numbers you've been seeing in terms of 2025. I'm straight lining the third Friday, September enrollments for 25-26. Our peak in terms of the enrollment numbers was really 2024. And so this next year for 26-27, that high point, even though it's been fairly flat for 4 years, slightly increased in 2024, has a bigger impact for us in terms of being fully annualized in terms of that 26-27 number. So you can't even see it, but I have added the projected 26-27, which is slightly higher in the 3-year rolling average. So if I use the same counts in 2025 for the third Friday, September, because of that 3-year rolling average, even though it's the same in terms of the individual year count, that little bit higher count in 2024 actually gives us just a little bit more revenues in terms of 26-27. And then this is the same projection in terms of showing the grace of our voters in terms of increasing expansion above the revenue limit as established in state law compared to the CPI. This is part of what the Wisconsin Policy Forum talked about when they came out with their budget brief on our budget. In terms of Madison having the support of their taxpayers, being a fairly stable financial position, not only with our finances, but also with our student enrollments compared to much of the rest of the state of Wisconsin, right? We can weather a couple of more years of lack of state support for our public schools, but it becomes very difficult to continue to operate either without additional revenues from the state or just revenues in total, right? Okay, here's the same bar chart you've been seeing. It's the growth that we're projecting that we've been talking about. I'm still estimating a decline of $7 million in general aids. We'll have a number on July 1. DPI is required by law to give us our first official estimate from the state of Wisconsin for this number. That, of course, comes after you vote on the budget. But I expect it to be pretty close to what we're projecting because of the way the state formula works and where we as a district lie within that calculation. But we'll get a first estimate. And then we'll get the final one on October 15th. We've talked about these. I've covered most of all of this. I can't say enough. The $325 that Governor Evers vetoed into a revenue limit increase per member is critical for us. It's another $10 million that we're getting in terms of increased revenue every year. Now, I'll quickly add, it's only about a 2% revenue increase, and our costs of a salary alone is 2.63. Double-digit health insurance, our costs are going up closer to 6%. So it's nowhere near covering the ongoing costs that we're having, but it's better than zero. So you look at it that way. So this preliminary budget has changed very little, but slightly in terms of the mill rate that I'm currently projecting. That's with us taking care of the 3.9 million in terms of an increase on salary. It's taking care of some increased costs for the MSCR in terms of the facilities. It's also the final calculation across all funds for our anticipated health insurance increases. That's a bit of a more complicated process. So it's really fine tuning kind of the total budget up slightly, but still very close to what we were in the May proposed budget. I talked about many of the assumptions that are more in the fine print. The average home has increased about 4% in the city of Madison. It's $500,300. If you look at the bottom right of this slide, it talks about the preliminary budget having an average city of Madison home value of $500,300. With the recalculation that we've already talked about, it becomes a projected tax bill for school portion of loan of $5,193.17, or about a $312 increase. That's compared to the $683 increase of last year, right? So it's really kind of big picture kind of blocks. It's about half as much of an increase that you approved last fall that we're projecting right now to this fall. So that's the high overview. We do have the May proposed budget on the link here. I will be updating, my team will be updating the publication for you to have for the June 22nd board meeting. We don't have that done yet. That'll finish up next week. But the May proposed budget, which is very close to what June budget's going to be, is on our website that we presented last month. And then it's open for questions.
I have no questions this evening, so I will open it up to my fellow board members. Board Member Moser-Feltham.
I don't have questions. Been following your, I've been following, I see where we're at, and I appreciate your work to get us that balanced budget, especially with the inclusion of addressing salary compression for veteran educators. So I don't have questions. You've been very clear.
Thank you, Board Member Moser-Feltham. Any further questions or discussion from the board? Board Member Nichols.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for all of your work. Earlier this evening, as we opened up, I know that Bob, you may not remember this, but we were talking about, this was in the section of tonight's meeting around salary compression and all of the work that had been done there. And board member and Chair Muldrow asked, just to be clear, like with this dollar amount, will this put us into a deficit? And you said, nope, I've added it in, we've gone back, we've looked at some expenses, and you said, and I've re-estimated the revenues. So based on what you just presented tonight, what is the re-estimated revenue piece? Can you just clarify that,
Sure,
if you don't mind?
sure. The biggest piece of re-estimating revenues is the state has said in 26-27, we're gonna get 45% special education reimbursement.
Okay.
I also talked about in the surplus budget, what they currently have appropriated for that is not sufficient to hit 45%. But that's what they said they were gonna fund. There's a lot of talk that said they will come through, both from Republicans and Democrats, and my expectation is they're gonna come through for us as we look forward into the year, whether it be this early fall or spring of 2027. I budgeted that we'll have 45% reimbursement. Now, worst case scenario, based on where we're at for 25-26 and the budget you approved last fall, we have about $15 million available in our Fund 10 balance, right? Still staying within the 12 to 18% range, which is the budget that you approved for this year. So worst case scenario, if the feds don't come through with USDA reimbursement and our costs are higher, if the state doesn't come through on their commitment to fund public schools, which is what the policy forum was talking about, Madison has good financial base right now. We can withstand the lack of state support for a few more years. I'm confident of that, but it's tight. It's not easy. But if we don't get more support from the state in terms of funding our schools, it becomes difficult for us. It becomes difficult.
Okay, thank you. You said all of that, but I just wanted to make sure. So can I just ask, when you gave us our
May proposed budget?
Yeah, the May proposed budget, was part of the estimated revenue at that point at 45%?
No,
Okay,
I was estimating 42% reimbursement.
so that's what's in this version.
What's in the May budget, correct?
And then for now, our June conversation, you've upped that to 45%.
That's correct.
Okay. And in the event that we don't get the 45%, let's say it comes in at the 42, which we would know maybe sometime between July and October, or not.
Or maybe later, depending on when the legislature comes back.
Okay,
Early 2027 potentially. My hope is that they come back together before the November elections and actually live up to their commitments that they currently have in the budget.
okay. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear. So because you built in special ed reimbursement at a 45%, we're not certain that will come in.
Correct.
Hopeful, but not 100% certain at this point. Is the thinking that if that revenue doesn't come in the way you budgeted it, that we will be looking at fund balance? Because I'm assuming you all have already made a lot of cuts and have looked for a lot of efficiencies across the budget, and that there wouldn't be a lot that you could tighten on expenses. So so I'm just trying to figure out, like, where do we come back if things don't work out exactly as you're budgeting today?
Sure. Two things. We have it's not exact, but we have about $15 million from the budget you approved last fall. So we approved a budget, you all approved a budget that had us about 15% fund balance. Your policy is 12 to 18%. In other words, we can use 3% of that fund balance for unexpected declines in revenues.
Okay.
Or unexpected increase in expenditures, like Scott and his hail damage from the 7 schools that we have looking at, which could be a couple $1 million, right? We don't have the final dollar amount.
That's right.
But that's what that fund balance can be.
Okay.
The other areas where we have actual costs less than our budgeted costs. The greatest example is 40 to 50 vacancies throughout, right? I budget for our authorize FTE for salary and health benefits because we have to, right? You can't spend that dollar twice, otherwise you create a bigger hole. If you had full employment, no vacancy. So those are our two biggest areas, right?
Okay,
Vacancies throughout the year where your actual costs are less than budgeted.
yeah,
And the fund balance that you built up over the last 2 years to allow us the flexibility.
yeah. Okay, that makes sense to me, because right now, we had a fund balance estimated in the balance budget of the 100,721,107,719 Then when you actually close out the year, that may go up a little because of vacancies.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There's two things we're looking at, which is, I won't even give a guess, so we're really gonna be at 25, 26, because we'll close out the books by the end of July.
Yes,
And a couple of things. I have to look at our revenues coming in, right? And then I have to look at our actual cost compared to budget. So there's multiple factors that come into play. But I would expect we're gonna be at least as good as what we budgeted balanced, right? My hope is we're gonna be a little bit to the positive. How much? I don't know, but I think we are gonna be at least what you approved in terms of a balanced budget.
okay. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Chair Nichols, I just want to, or sorry, Chair Muldrow, Board Member Nichols, I just want to also reiterate that Bob and I and our team went through the same scenario you're doing right now. We've gone through extensively the past few weeks. All of us arrived in the same place and support this budget, this preliminary budget.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to double check, because when you said you had to re-estimate the revenue, I just wanted to make sure that I was tracking if we had like increased the estimated revenue or decreased it a little bit, but and there's so much uncertainty right now, and I trust that you all have gone through a lot of scenarios. So I'm hoping that my indication earlier this evening to expand by a couple of schools isn't the thing that's gonna.
It's not.
Okay,
It's not.
great. Think we'll be okay.
You have additional questions?
Nope, done.
All right, Board Member Sarevo, I think I saw your hand up. Okay.
I'll keep it short. Thank you, Chair Muldrow. Bob, I just want to say I appreciate the way that you provide a lot of different ways of understanding the complexities of school funding while also being very colorful about it. And some of them, which also makes it easier to digest. Just did it. Just right? Okay. Sorry, it's been a long one. I'm always in flux about like what the legislature's doing because they didn't have any sort of general ed stayed the same. While we're also playing around with a much higher number for the special ed reimbursement. I'm always in flux with thank you but what about that piece? I'm just being very cognizant of that because I've always, as much as I've followed and advocated for special education, what they don't give you, we're pulling out of the other funds to make up for. And so it's like playing one up against the other. And I don't like doing that. But I really appreciate the city to continue to support the public schools and the ways that you have to balance the budget in order to do that. And you mentioned IDEA. I'm wondering where are we with that? It's supposed, when it was created, it was supposed to be 40. Last I knew, we were somewhere around 16% for that. What is our actuals for that one?
Yeah, and I think it's less than 60%. I'd have to look for the budget for the big pictures in terms of a balanced budget. I've been talking to the team. We're gonna assume we're gonna get the same IDA allocation this year to next. And a couple of weeks ago, I did confirm that statewide, we don't have our individual. Statewide, we're up 1%. And I expect the way to work, we continue to increase the number of kids on IEPs. And I believe our allocation is gonna be at least what we have to next. But I've already budget.
Okay.
So, yes.
I don't know if that makes that number change over time, but That would also be nice if that would.
Yeah, I mean, the way I tell people about it is, you know, in reality, when IDA passed in '70s, I believe the Fed said 30 to 40%, right? They're probably closer to 10 to 12% right now, right? And the state covers the rest supposedly, right? But
Yeah.
no, that's not our reality, right? It hasn't been anywhere near that, so.
Like I've been watching both and thinking back when we used to have 60%. And like if the other one was 40, like that would be great. Cause that covers a lot of groundwork on the flip side, but. Yeah, I just appreciate all the. Very transparent, the way that you have all the numbers put in here. I find it easy to follow and. I appreciate all the work that you're doing and everything that you're also taking into. Taking in real time and applying it and letting us know like where everything lands.
Sure.
Thank you.
Welcome.
That's it, Chad.
Thank you, Board Member Saravo. There are no further questions. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So. Okay.
All right, all those in favor? Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good team.
I got